Good evening, council, senior management team, members of the public. I see we have quorum, and I'll call to this regular meeting of council for Monday, August 12th at 5:30 p.m. Singing of the national anthem. Ask all those that are able to rise, and we shall sing the national anthem, led by our clerk, Ms. Wazat.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Okay, approval of agenda. After viewing the agenda, does any councilors have any comments on the agenda or its order? Not seeing any, I call the question. Be it, motion put forward by Councillor Corr and seconded by Councillor Hahn. Be it resolved that the agenda for the August 12th, 2019 regular meeting of council be adopted as circulated. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carried. And at this point, I have to ask, after viewing the agenda, does any councillor have a pecuniary interest or general nature thereof to declare? Not seeing any, may the clerk please note that. Hearing of presentations, delegations, and regional report. Presentations. The first one we have this evening is a sad notice about a Pelham resident, Robert Bob Giles, passed away at the age of 89. Bob joined the Pelham Fire Department in 1947 and retired in 1997, serving 50 years, unbelievable, of active firefighting to his community. Bob was one of the longest active members, not only for Pelham Fire, but throughout the province. I'd like to take this opportunity on behalf of council and the senior management team and the rest of the staff of town of Pelham to extend our condolences to the Giles family. And perhaps the chief could comment on the, I hear the ceremony was quite the remarkable one.
I just stand over here so I'm not
Yeah.
in that light in my eyes. Yeah, it was quite a send-off. We had a very good turnout of firefighter walkthrough from other municipalities that showed up. We used the old 39, which is our oldest antique truck, but we used that to shuttle the casket to the internment, and it was well represented. The family was, and then we had a little luncheon send-off back at the fire station for people to visit and say goodbye. So it was very well done.
Excellent. Very good. Thank you, Chief. Okay, may he rest in peace. The next is on a more happier note, and I asked the acting mayor, or acting deputy mayor, to join me in the presentation of an award. You're going to carry the flowers there, Councilor. And we ask Ms. Sally Yeager to step forward.
Oh, wow, that's ours. No, August
Sally
1st.
has been with the town for 25 years. I believe you're program director and special festivals.
Special events and festivals.
Special events and festivals. So Sally, and our appreciation of your dedication, and I know that you guys in Iraq put in some long hours when these events are going on. appreciate this. The town presents you with a watch for that, and plaque, and the flowers.
Congratulations, Sally.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Service.
Thank you.
Oh, maybe if perhaps, and Vicky, you want to
Sorry?
Yeah, no, I just switched over and nobody does anything about it. Naturally, it's just not me anymore.
Thank you very much.
I guess. Stupid. This is what I'm doing right now. And not watch it.
Okay, I can't not say anything. I'm sorry. This is supposed to be like that. Anyhow, all I can say is Sally has been with us for 25 years, and she started her career out in the building department, and I believe that she suffered through that for 18 years. And I was able to rope her in to start off as our admin, and then when we posted for our festivals and events programmer, she clearly stepped in, and ever since she's been just awesome. We can always rely on her to host 40,000 people on a weekend, no problem. I really have to hand it to her family for being able to put up with her schedule, and I'm sure a lot of probably screaming in the middle of the night. But it's awesome. Sally, congratulations. And 25 years. What? Where did the years
I
go?
know.
You know?
I know.
We raised Rachel?
Yep.
Anyhow, congratulations.
Okay. Thank you again, Sally. Great. The next presentation is the East Font Hill overview provided by the gentleman, Ron Palmer. The floor is yours, Mr. Palmer.
Mr. Mayor, can everyone hear me?
Maybe a little bit higher.
I'll do my best. I have no children. I
Oh.
didn't develop the loud. So I'll do my best. It's always a pleasure to be here in Font Hill. I have not been coming here for 25 years. I did start this secondary plan in April of 2001, so 18 years and a bit. I've been here through several councillors, several mayors, several planners. So I'm happy to be here to talk about the East Font Hill Secondary Plan and the East Font Hill Mixed Use Center, which is part of that secondary plan. I had a conversation with Barb last week, and she wanted me to give you a bit of a refresher on where the plan came from, why it looks the way it looks, what's important, and what is not important, or less important, because it's all important. My firm has done a tremendous amount of work on behalf of Pelham, and we're responsible, along with staff and council, the 3 Niagara Community Design Awards that you proudly display out in the hallway. We're very proud of them ourselves. Starting with the East Font Hill Secondary Plan in 2014. As I said, I started in 2001. We had a long journey to approval for a whole host of reasons, not the least of which was an extravaganza of provincial policy that came upon us in 2005 and 2006 through the Greenbelt Plan and through the Growth Plan. These things fundamentally change the way we did community planning and community design. And you can see the difference in those policies in how East Fonthill is evolving into an urban community. Eventually, in 2014, the plan was approved by the Ontario Municipal Board before it was changed to the LPAT. And subsequent to that, we've had another hearing that was more focused on the mixed-use center, but nonetheless was part of the ongoing evolution of this community, attached to what always has been a lovely urban community of Fonthill. We did have some requirements to achieve. We are required to conform with Places to Grow, the first version back in 2006. We're also required to conform with the regional official plan. That was very important because that is what established the new urban boundary for Fonthill. And it was our job to do the detailed planning work for the two areas for the urban boundary expansion. One at the other end of Fonthill, and then the larger one, East Fonthill, on the east side of Fonthill. We have to be consistent with the provincial policy statement. Fundamentally, we were required to achieve a minimum density of 50 persons and jobs per hectare. That is very different than the way Fonthill had developed over time. I haven't done the detailed numbers, but my guess would be that your typical suburban community would be about 20 to 25 persons and jobs per hectare. So we are basically doubling the density of development. That requires a commitment to smaller lots for single detached, more townhouses, and more apartments.
And that was all government policy.
That was provincial policy that had to be implemented by the region and subsequently by you.
Thank you.
The world continues to change on provincial policy. The last growth plan changed that number to 80 persons and jobs per hectare. I was fortunate or unfortunate enough, depending how you want to look at it, to try and develop communities at that density. And again, it was basically no single detached. Townhouses and apartments, that's all. The recent change, one of them, puts it back in Niagara to 50. So we're still on track and correct in that assumption for East Fonthill. We are required to include in the plan a range and mix of housing types. When I drive around East Fonthill today, I see the beginning of the achievement of that range. Singles are always first, followed by the towns, followed by the apartments. My understanding in talking to Barb is that there are some apartments that are in the works, but certainly on the ground we have townhouses, singles. The singles, of course, are a little tighter than you're used to here in Fonthill, but nonetheless you're achieving them, and the streetscapes are looking very good for the density that is required. This plan also included an employment area, and that employment area is the area of the mixed-use center at the intersection of Regional Road 20 and Rice Road. We were able to convert some of that land to a mixed-use designation, but still some of it is required to remain non-residential. That property on the map is the purple part. The red part is where the mixture of uses is permitted, including residential. And of course, the preservation of the natural heritage system was a fundamental element of the plan. There is a creek in the northern part, but the primary natural heritage system is down at the south end of the community, as you can see by the green areas down in the south. So in terms of the requirements, Notwithstanding all the changes and the continuous change that we are having with provincial and at some point regional planning policy, this plan is still valid in terms of those policy requirements. There were other objectives. We worked through this plan with the public, with the councils of the day, with the planners of the day. And certainly there were objectives that we were trying to achieve that were related to pedestrian-oriented development, making it a pleasant place to walk, so that you could walk to places to work, you could walk to places to shop, places to eat, places to recreate, all connected with bicycle trails and pedestrian trails, making sure that the road network was connected. We were moving away from crescents and cul-de-sacs into a more highly interconnected road pattern. Not a pure grid, but certainly not a lot of cul-de-sacs permitted. Our job was also to make sure phasing happened in a logical and cost-effective way. That was an interesting discussion since the regional sewer pipe was installed well before development started. And they were very anxious to start using that pipe after the investment had been made. But now, clearly, things are rolling and it's starting. This whole area, like everything inside the settlement area boundary of Font Hill, is required to be on full urban infrastructure, sewer, water, stormwater management. I was asked to talk a little bit about laneways and why they're included in this plan. And I'd like to start off with their required adjacent to the arterial and collector road network, and that also coincides with higher density forms of housing. The reason that we do that is that the laneway opportunity is much more efficient in terms of operations. Much less friction with cars coming in and out of driveways. Better opportunities for on-street parking, which is a huge enhancement to pedestrian comfort. It creates an automatic buffer. And from an urban design perspective, the issue, and I've got two pictures that try to illustrate the difference, as lots get narrower, it squeezes the garage out the front of the house. And it creates a streetscape that puts the front door way at the back, dominated by the garage door, not very pedestrian friendly, not very attractive in fact, and not really in keeping with what was in Font Hill today, where you have the nice wide lots, the big garages and the big driveways. So the idea here is to use the townhouses and the higher density forms of housing to get a little closer to the street edge, to create a pedestrian friendly opportunity with porches and front doors closer to the street, and move the garage door to the back. Operationally, it's better. Safety-wise, it's better. And aesthetically, it's better. So that's why they are required in specific locations. They're not required everywhere, but certainly in the higher density areas and adjacent to the collectors and the arterial road network. Overall, it's my opinion, having worked on this plan for half my career and having written 65 secondary plans across the province, that this plan remains valid. The vision, the objectives remain valid and will result in an appropriate urban community, different than older Font Hill, but certainly in keeping with provincial and regional planning frameworks, and particularly that density requirement of 50 persons and jobs per hectare. It is designed, this community, as a complete community. There are places to live, places to work, places to shop. Today you have a brand new community center that provides huge opportunity for recreational activities. The goal is that there's an interconnected trails network and also my understanding is an involving healthcare opportunity, which is also an amazing piece, not only for East Fonthill, but for Pelham overall. The community design elements of this plan, including the interconnected park system, is really important, and that promotes some of the newer planning principles of healthy living and active transportation. Catchphrases that the planners use, but here are actually being achieved with the development of the plan as it has been designed. I end every concluding statement about the secondary plans with the same thing. Development takes a long time, doesn't happen overnight. It happens in incremental pieces. What's really important is that the incremental pieces work together to achieve an overall plan. So far so good. I'm going to move on to a couple of other pieces. We also had the opportunity to do a downtown master plan for both Fonthill and Fenwick. And the bigger vision for Fonthill was really looking at linking the historic downtown along Regional Road 20 to the new mixed-use center and creating Regional Road 20 as kind of a bigger downtown for the community as the community grows and can support the level of retail and service commercial uses that could eventually be here. I remember being here at the beginning of 2001, and most of the retail shopping dollars were spent in St. Catharines or Welland. There was very little opportunity here. So things have changed and continue to change in what I think is a really positive way. The other big idea is how to connect it all together, not just with the road network, but with trails and off-street opportunities that link east-west through the community to make it easy to go from one part to the other and to link East Fonthill with the rest of Fonthill so that people who live in older Fonthill can use the facilities in East Fonthill and vice versa. We wanted to make sure that everything didn't have to look the same either. Certainly we have some historic elements in the existing downtown, but that doesn't need to be copied. In fact, if you copy it, it diminishes the value of the real history. So it should be different. It should have different functions. It should look different. Regional Road 20 is the spine that connects everything together, and it's a very important road in this community. I drive down it today and I see the evolution happening. I was telling someone before the meeting started that even before 2001 I was coming to Fonthill. I had friends building a house in West Lincoln and they came to the lumberyard just about every weekend looking for something. That's changed. Things are continuing to change along the entire road, evolving it from what was a real mix of uses and functions into something that is a little more consistent in terms of built form and commercial function. So that's the starting point for how the mixed-use center fits into all that. Mixed-use center, also a winner of a Niagara Community Design Award. That was in 2016. I only mention this because there's something good here. The vision, the effort that's been put into it, and not just by me, but by staff and council over the years, is valuable and is prized by the region as good work. The concept plan is intended to take the mixed-use center and create an opportunity for a whole host of uses that can work together to create what would typically be a mini downtown, where you can do everything within a 2-minute walk. You can play squash, you can live, you can go to the doctor, you can shop. Just about any daily function that you wish, you can do in this center. And it is evolving that way. There's also key elements of the open space system within the mixed-use center that are intended for use by the entire community. They are of a scale and potentially of the design that they create opportunities for places for the entire town of Pelham to congregate for special occasions. And those are very important opportunities. The idea of the master plan, it's not called a secondary plan, we already have a secondary plan, was to provide much more specific and more detailed guidance for the preparation of zoning, which we did, but also for municipal investment in the streetscapes, public buildings, and the park system, which has begun. The streetscapes that frame this area, Rice Road, we anticipate being a major connector between Font Hill, Pelham, and Lake Erie, all the way down through Welland and to the lake. It's a big road. It's going to get bigger. It's going to become urban, and it needs opportunities to create a great interface between the traffic function, the pedestrian function, and the cycling function, as well as it is also your boundary between the urban part of Pelham and the rural separator that is further to the east. Regional Road 20, I've mentioned, is also a very important road. Some of it is being established through built form, being brought closer to the street, opportunities for outdoor cafes, more retail, more service commercial, along with opportunities for residential development. That's very important. The other thing we're trying to do is create a pedestrian-friendly interface. We know that there's going to be surface parking lots. We know that there are already 2 drive-through facilities. So the goal is that what is it that harmonizes the street and makes it look fantastic from Rice Road to downtown Font Hill? And that's a streetscaping exercise. The Civic Square is a really important part of the whole mixed-use center plan, and it's not just about the piece of public open space that is included as part of the Civic Square. It spills out over the road, it spills onto adjacent properties, onto the front yard of the community center, onto the front yard of Wellspring Place, onto the front side yard of the grocery store. The idea being that this place can expand. The idea is if there is a Font Hill event that needs a space that is bigger than the space just outside this building, you can use the piece of public open space. If it's something that includes the entire Pelham community, you can spill out off that park onto the streets. They can be closed. It can be the big Canada Day place. The idea is there's flexibility in the design. It can be easily shut to traffic. There's other alternative routes to get from where you're going, but that you've created a square that only needs to be that big once or twice a year. We did do some preliminary design work, working with a maple tree motif. But at the end of the day, the design is really what you can afford, when you can afford it, and how you're going to do it over time. You can build this park just like the mixed-use center incrementally. And you can design it so that it grows over time and that its function changes over time. The goal, though, is that it's a really important part of the plan, not just for the commercial uses that are in this center or the recreational uses, but for the entire community of Font Hill. The next part is the gateway. You've built a stormwater management pond. The intersection of Rice Road and Regional Road 20 is the gateway to Font Hill. In my mind, it's a really important statement to make It's an opportunity to say, welcome to Font Hill. We're a beautiful community. We value design and the beauty of the neighborhoods, and we're going to make a great statement here, not only with the stormwater management facility, but with the development that is adjacent to it. It can be more than just Font Hill. It can be Pelham as well, because you come through the rural interface and hit this corner and have a view straight up the hill. So it's very, very important. This is from another community, but this is the kind of idea that we were building upon with the design of the pond, the promotion of some built form adjacent to that pond, to create a really inviting statement. Welcome to Font Hill. What's really important is coordinating the landscape, the signage, the built form, and the streetscapes that form the edges of that piece. What you don't want is a corporate image that could happen in every town in Niagara. So as I conclude the discussion on the mixed-use center and open it up for any questions, you guys need to know that every community in Southern Ontario in the Greater Golden Horseshoe is trying to build a mixed-use center, and they're having no luck. I've been doing them in Markham, Vaughan, Richmond Hill, Oakville. They can't get any traction. They get one residential development and a large format retail store. They get one thing and nothing else. You are an example that I show them to say, look, it can be done. It's really important to get it. You don't want to create a center that looks like a large format retail center. You're well beyond that now. You have opportunities. You have had discussions with other users in this center, which are all positive. And the reason that it looks the way it does today is the long-term political will to this vision. This vision was developed with the community, was developed over a long period of time, and councils before you have said, you know what, we agree with this community developed vision and we want it to be built the way we envisioned it. You have control over certain parts of what happens. Public realm obviously is your responsibility. The streetscapes, the community center, the other park elements that are here, those are really important parts that change the value of the land. They enhance the value of the property. Your investments come back in land value and attractiveness. Very important elements. You are a landowner, which is another key element that isn't the same as in other municipalities. That property is a strategic opportunity to monetize or to use to build or attract other parts of the mixed-use center that you need. It takes a long time. This has been going on, planning since 2001. 18 years later, we have the beginnings of something really good. It's going to take more decisions from council to stay with the vision, to continue the positive work that has been done so far, and to work with the developers who have built it with you. I have to admit that we had long, drawn-out, not always lovely conversations with some of your development partners, but in my mind, they've done a tremendous job on their parts of the plan so far. So you need to keep working with them. They're the ones who are going to build the rest of it. And keep up the pressure to get stuff that is good. Craig Larmer, one of the former planners, mentioned to me something I told him years ago about from the CAO of the town of Markham. He said, I'll change the wording slightly. Crap happens, but it doesn't happen in Markham. I think you need to keep that in mind. Fonthill is a lovely community. Don't let the wrong things happen in the wrong place. So with that, I appreciate the time, and I'm happy to try and answer any questions that you have.
Before opening up to council, if I may, the back lane concept that is incorporated, or is, I believe is going to be incorporated in the East Fonthill, have you got any second regrets on that? I mean, number one, it's an additional road you have to maintain at the back of the house. I realize, as you said, you have to do this, but how do you, the whole back lane concept doesn't seem to have caught on, although they have it in Niagara-on-the-Lake. Can you explain that a little more about why that is so preferred? And I mean, I know a lot of cons. Obviously, you think that's all pros. So if you could.
No, there are certainly detractors from the concept. Although I will tell you, we've been building laneway housing in Ontario for 150 years, and it's simply part of the lexicon. Fonthill's a little bit too new to have much of that, but it's certainly around. The provincial government built Cornell in Markham as a demonstration of a fully lane-based product to work out issues of fire protection, snow plowing, etc. And all things have been overcome. All of the preliminary concerns are no longer concerns. A lot of times you'll hear that it's not very efficient, it creates extra road. But that's partly true. But what I have to remind you is that the efficiency, and it depends on how you measure efficiency, we're already doubling the density. So we're already twice as efficient. So if we take a little bit back for the pavement issue, that's been the trade-off. I will also tell you, though, that when you add up all the pavement based on the old style versus the new style, there isn't tremendous amount more pavement. It's just who owns it. So at the end of the day, there's still a lot of pavement. The other thing that goes with a more modern community is narrower road rights of way and narrower pavement widths, which are intended to tame traffic. And fundamentally, the whole goal of every provincial policy since 2006 has been make sure we're designing these communities so that someday transit will work. If you start putting transit on the collector road network, which this plan has been designed for, down that central road, you don't want cars backing in and out onto that street. You want a row of parked cars and bus stops. It's much, much safer. So sure, there are pros and cons. We believe technically the cons have been worked out, Markham being the guinea pig. And the pros still stand. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. I'll open it up to council. Councilor Hahn.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thanks very much for your presentation. First off, I have a few questions. So, as far as the plan goes, clearly you've outlined that, you know, the plan is still appropriate, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm just wondering, now, have you had a chance to compare and contrast to what was built versus the plan that was designed? In other words, have you looked at you called it streetscaping, and I know there's somewhere around here, and the office is a Bristol board, and it's got a lot of trees, a lot of really wide sidewalks. Have you compared that plan that you designed to what actually exists in East Fonthill? So I'm thinking of like the Food Basics Plaza. just the amount of trees, the amount of streetscaping, the stores fronting, having the entranceways facing Highway 20 and having really wide sidewalks with abundance of trees, which doesn't appear to be the case. Is that still, have you compared and contrast against what you developed? Are we on
Again,
track?
It's always an evolution. Part of the initial discussion on Regional Road 20, on that frontage, was about the overhead wires. And there's not really any point in doing the full streetscape treatment until that issue is resolved, because you'd have to tear it up to put it back. So the trees the assumption was the wires were gone. Can't plant all those trees until the wires are gone. So in my mind, when I look at it, I say, yes, it's a huge improvement. Is it finished? No. The rest of the community, when I drive around, I think for the most part, it's achieving the intended design vision. Is it exactly the same in every location? No. But it's certainly moving towards something that is really good.
So further to that, so we call it the Gateway Pond. So the Gateway Pond right now is fairly swampy looking with the tall grass, et cetera, kind of au naturel looking. So the plan is that will be streetscape to look more like your picture that you had here, where it's more aesthetically pleasing. Because you've got a very steep slope to that pond. So I wouldn't want to be the one on the lawnmower, but is that something that is planned to be groomed?
I don't recall the detailed design. I think part of the design has absolute straight walls, which of course are intended to be straight walls. The naturalized element, some municipalities are going to a naturalized look, which can still function and look fantastic. It really depends on what other elements you're thinking you might put in the pond. Will there be a fountain feature? Will there be tree planting? I know there was a whole tree planting plan. I don't remember if it's a highly manicured pond or not, but I do know there are other elements, including a public art piece, that could be added over time.
So you wouldn't, if you're coming from Thorold to Fawn Hill, you wouldn't see the pond and then immediately a plaza with a wall or a drive-through. The idea was you'd have lots of trees to kind of give it that green, aesthetically pleasing look, and then plaza.
My main point is, it could be built form, it could be landscape. What it shouldn't be is a Burger King sign or a Dairy Queen sign. I can already see the McDonald's sign from way down the street. So it's really what happens immediately adjacent to the pond, I think, is really important. And it can be a combination of built form landscape. But again, at the end of the day, I'm aware that there is a land deal in the works, and they've asked for additional drive-through facilities. So at the end of the day, if there are to be additional drive-through facilities, which wouldn't be my first choice, however, there are some realities in life, and they've done a good job on the other two. I would hate to see the built form immediately adjacent to the pond be the next drive-through. It should be something more impressive.
Thanks.
Any other comments, Council? Councilor Yildirim?
I just got a question about Summerside Boulevard. Was that part of the design? Can you explain that design to me?
You're going to Summerside in this plan?
Skinny, long road with the roundabouts. Very, very skinny.
It's the east-west road.
Joint Station Street with the...
Oh, yes. This, the crooked one. With
The crooked one. Yeah, the crooked one.
yeah, I can't remember exactly what the final road right-of-way width is. It's intended to be a collector. And the roundabouts are part of the design. The key element is the connection right into where we are today. So that's going to be the primary route from most of Font Hill into East Fonthill. And we saw that as a pretty important piece, and particularly the connection, the station.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I understand that it's, basically it's two single lanes right now rather than one
Yeah,
lane. That's
I would
where I
have to
got
look it
it.
up to see what the final design
Oh, I
is.
see. Okay,
But it's intended to be something that carries traffic.
right. I understand.
Councilor Hahn?
I do have another question in regards to, you'd mentioned the significance and importance of Rice Road, and maybe you can speak to this, maybe you can't, but it just, a bit of a head scratcher for me why it is that it's being altered right now, but we've missed an opportunity to double it. So we have turning lanes, but if it's, as you mentioned, so pivotal that we have this, it takes us to Welland and then through to Lake Erie, why we would only have turning lanes and not have it at this juncture, we're missing the boat to not have it doubled. You must have noticed that when you drove around.
I did notice that it was Rice Road Light. But again, that's never over until it's over. My goal with Rice Road would be that the pedestrian and cycling ways are set off it enough that a future widening would be permissible and achievable. It's already been dug up a couple of times, because I know that's where the main trunk sewer is. That was put in 12 years ago. So, you know, roads have kind of a life of their own. Is that a regional road as well?
Yes. But we're putting houses just feet from the intersection where the new light's going, so I don't know if you went to Port Robinson and Rice, there's a new set of lights going there, if you drove around there.
Yeah.
There's saffron development there, and those, we would never be able to have the allowance now, because it's been used with homes, so we've given up that opportunity to widen right
That's
there.
room on the other side.
3 and 1,
I don't know,
okay.
to be honest. I don't know what the design brief was for Rice Road at the region.
Any other questions? I guess if I'll play the devil's advocate, and so you were involved since 2001. Planning obviously has evolved a lot since then. So I guess if you had to do it all over again, hindsight being 2020, what new concepts have come out in the meantime that you would have now said, oh, it's too bad we hadn't done that? And I realize it's 2020, and so, but is there anything else that's happening that would have been appreciated more in East Fonthill?
That's a really good question. We planners are trained to think 20, 30 years ahead. I think in the design we appropriately anticipated active transportation and healthy communities. That goes with the trail network, the road network interconnectivity, and the park system. I think one of the things that I've been adding to secondary plans now is a section on resiliency and sustainability and other alternatives for how a community can be designed to improve those two elements of planning. And it's not really about how the community is designed, it's how the buildings are dealt with. So it zooms in on that part of the development process. But as far as, well, I could bring up all the things I lost at the OMB, which I'd really like to have back. But, you know, that was the OMB, and we made some decisions to get the approval. No, I think that the design holds up well. This was designed by my urban design partner, who's now retired, but he has designed some of the best looking communities in this province. And in fact, several times we took new councils out to some of those communities to have a look at what they looked like 10, 15, 20 years in. So I'm happy with the way the design is. The devil is in the details. The park system is going to be really important because it's something that hasn't shown up yet. But overall, you know, another thing that we're anticipating is the change in retail. And the expectation is that over time, bricks and mortar is going to get smaller and more specialized. And that the real successful retail centers are going to be the ones that have a character that people want to go and hang out in. The other thing, corollary of that, is there's going to be a lot more retail warehousing because everybody's going to be shopping online. They may go downtown Fonthill to point their smartphone at the 5 things they want, and then when they get home, it'll be delivered. So bricks and mortar retail is changing dramatically. The good news is that the larger format retail is not expected to last for 100 years. It's expected to evolve and be replaced. So the good news is with the plaza part is that over time that could intensify, residential could be added to that, and it could totally change in its format and parking requirements. The other thing that we need to think about is when land values demand it, parking structures may become fiscally appropriate here in Fonthill. And that's a whole other change. But the good news is that because you have large surface parking, those can fill in. So again, I think fundamentally I would have policy about sustainability and resiliency, which you don't have here.
Interesting, thank you. Councilor Stewart?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, when this design was developed, was there consideration given to having housing above the retail?
Absolutely.
And is that anywhere in this plan?
Totally permitted.
I'm sorry?
It is permitted.
Well, not permitted, but was it seriously considered?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We would like to see the mixed-use part, the part that you own. We would love to see retail at grade and residential above. A lot more developers are getting into that model. When this plan was done, the developers were either residential developers or commercial developers. Now we're seeing them coming back as mixed-use developers. It's a tough thing to get into because you've got to figure out how the economics work. But absolutely, it's something that we would love to see here. And why not on your land?
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments for Mr. Palmer? Not seeing none. Mr. Palmer, thank you for your presentation. Gave us history on that east development that a lot of us obviously didn't have, being all new here. And we appreciate your half a lifetime that you gave us on that development. Half a career. Yes. Okay.
And Barb has my
Right.
contact. I'm happy to come back anytime.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So a motion put forward by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Kaur. Be it resolved that council receive the presentation by Ron Palmer, providing an East Fonthill overview for information. Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, I call the motion to a vote. All those in favor? All those against? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. One more delegation. So, council, the next delegation, 5.2.1, Oscar Wayland and Jeff Howe, talking about the Hay Street chicane. Gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Like a tag team. Yes, dear council members, my name is Oscar Wheeland, a longtime resident of Hay Street, the only farmer left on Hay Street, and the oldest one too. And Jeff Howe is a resident right next to this chicane, so we can tell you exactly what happens 24 hours a day, whatever happens along the chicane. We are here respectfully requesting the removal of the chicane on Hay Street. A little bit of history. The discussion about the chicane started in 2013, and then in 2015 a temporary chicane was installed as a potential traffic calming pilot project on Hay Street. That was in 2015. Now, since then, we have seen tremendous growth and changes within the former Area 1 urban boundary expansion area, with the development of about 400 new housing units, and the amount of traffic flow has increased substantially, because a lot of these new homes have 2 cars, and there's a lot of traffic coming out of there. The need for a 2-lane roadway to keep traffic flowing smoothly is an absolute necessity. Due to the number of complaints by many local residents about the chicane, I decided to visit and talk to my neighbors, and as a follow-up then started a chicane survey. And this is what I found out. After visiting over 100 homeowners on Hayes, Brewerton, Klein, Abbott, Buckley, Marlene Stewart Drive, Fillmore Drive, my results showed that 96% of the owners, 96% interviewed, expressed their disapproval and definitely want this chicane removed. I was really surprised at this high number, because it is more of a traffic hazard and endangers public safety than a traffic calming deterrent. Now here's an example. It has 2 yield signs in both directions. One serious collision will hold the town financially responsible and accountable. I think to have 2 yield signs facing each other is against the Highway Traffic Act. Now we have traffic congestion. By reducing a busy 2-lane road into a narrow pass-through, 1 vehicle at a time, doesn't make a lot of sense. Also, vehicles have been damaged by hitting the concrete curbing, and in the winter after heavy snowfall, or by dense fog, these curbs become invisible. And you can imagine what could happen. This chicane is an eyesore and also devalues our properties. Is it cost effective? We have spent already probably near to $100,000 for constant maintenance, on consultant fees, engineers' fees, on reports, evaluations. So for 6 years now, we have spent money on this chicane. And what do we get? Let's have a look at it. Snowplows can't get through. Neither can large farm equipment. Oversized RVs from Bissell's, large construction vehicles, no room for 18-wheelers, although on Facebook one went through and we heard a lot of noise and all the signs were down. I don't know what was there any damage on this 18-wheeler? I don't know. My oil delivery truck couldn't make it. Now, could you imagine an oil truck backing his big truck from this chicane back to Highway 20, getting into Highway 20 to get around there? Just think about it. I wouldn't want to drive that truck. Next, it impedes fire trucks and also ambulances in case of an emergency. And we do have that emergency or ambulance going down quite a bit to Bissell's because they have a lot of people there who need their assistance. So what is the best solution? The best solution has to be least intrusive, cost-effective, and practical. The majority of the residents stated that they would prefer low-rise speed bumps, no, not like they have on Hayes Street South. They were way too high. Normal speed bumps. Parking along Hayes Street should be allowed. That would slow down the traffic. A three-way stop at Haste and Brewerton. And you also see solar-activated speed signs for the drivers. So if you go over the speed limit, it flashes a number. Okay. These would be the most sensible and effective ways to implement traffic calming measures. The removal of this chicane would solve a lot of your problems, and it would make a lot of residents in our area very, very happy. So, Jeff, you've got a few things to say.
Can I live directly in front of the chicanes, 1515 Hay Street. So I'm not going to highlight all the negatives of living there. You already know that. It's just that I did some stats, my own stats, and I realized there was some data presented back in 2017. I didn't see all those stats. But they said the calming process and slow driving was effective. But those 2 days they did the data, it was raining for 2 days. So obviously people are going to slow down for the weather conditions. So I don't consider that data valid. I consider it invalid. So it should be done maybe more often. I asked, no results. Today, just at random, some days I go out there, I don't spend my whole day looking at the chicanes, all right? But today I went out there from 7:30 a.m. to 8:05 a.m., 33 minutes. 52 cars went through. 43 did not yield. 43 were definitely going over the speed limit. And beside that, they're crossing the center line. So on the east and west side, you're supposed to come to the diamonds, yield, common courtesy, you go through, and let the next person. They actually form a train. So one person's there, they latch on the bumper, the next bumper, the next one, they form a train. So now you got 4 cars on one side, and the other person on the side is getting impatient. What happens? They put the horn on. They maybe give you a hand gesture, all right? So that all builds up. But the trouble is, they're crossing the center line 50, 80 meters before they get to the chicanes. So now if I'm back in my driveway, or my neighbor 1519, or 1516, or 1513, now we can't back out because they're on our side of the road. I think it's okay that you come up to the diamonds and proceed slowly, but to actually cross the center line 50, 80, 100 meters on the other side, on the opposite side of the road, east or west side, becomes rather dangerous for kids who are cycling, people walking. So I think the intention of the chicanes in 2017 was a good intention. I don't think the old council was that creative. I don't think they did proper research. If you look in anything in the United States, in Texas or in Oklahoma or in Florida or Arizona or the UK, they have chicanes. They don't like the chicanes we have on Hay Street. They're too narrow, they've been moved, you can't get essential services through them. Garbage people are always complaining to me when I put the garbage out, what are the things doing here? I'm just a resident. I'm just one individual, one spokesperson for Hay Street North. I helped form a committee in 2011. That's 8 years ago. We're here today in 2019. I really don't notice an improvement. I think it was a good idea, a good concept, but I don't think it was actually thought out by engineers. Maybe a technologist, maybe a technician, but not an engineer. Because they were designed, then in 24 hours they were moved, cut up, poured cement in, and they keep adding and adding. So I really think they should be removed, personally. I think there should be an alternative method of doing something. I'm not saying give up on the calming process. I'm saying let's think about removing chicanes, reconsider it, and think of some other way of slowing down traffic. All over Fawn Hill and Pelham. I don't think chicanes are the answer. But thanks for listening to us. I know it started in 2011, it's 2019, we're going all over the same thing, but hopefully we come to some solution that might help the residents of Hay Street.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. I'll open it up to questions from council. Councilor Corr.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation. And you're absolutely right. I get scared going down Hay Street because I got to line up my truck or my vehicle because I'm afraid of missing it or scuffing my tiles. I support you people. I hope that we could, as council, get back to you as soon as possible. I know there will be a cost, and I think it's the right thing to do. I think it's time for that thing to disappear. And you're absolutely right. Over the years, 6 years ago or 8 years ago, there was hardly anything. And now with the new development, you're just going to ask for trouble. And there's other ways of calming the traffic, like you mentioned, three-way stops, parking the cars down there. And
Something else,
yes. And even, you know, with all the traffic going to the Tim Hortons, they're already going back onto Hay Street, I notice some days.
And I think some of the local residents or people visiting, they know how to go through the chicanes without decreasing the speed. Like I said, they're actually crossing the center line
Yes.
on the opposite side of the road, east or west side, and actually going through without slowing down.
No, you're absolutely right. I'm 3-4 houses lining up to
Yeah,
go
I
through
know.
it, knowing that there's not another car on the other side. When
And
there's another car, you get a little
It's
nervous.
gotta be common courtesy. Someone
Yes.
comes up, you yield, and you let one person through, but not form a train of people going through, you know what I mean? I think it's upsetting for someone trying to go through.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, is there a possibility of doing a study and getting senior staff to look at it? And,
That is what the motion will be.
Okay.
When we're done discussing.
Okay, thank you. And you have my support.
I think my neighbor down, we have 5 homes where I live, and my neighbor asked me to mention this. They have 5 little kids, and they're out on the road with their bicycles and so on and so on. And when they get to that hill, to the top of the brow of the hill, and then they start speeding seriously, because it's already, they can see all the way to what's that street at the end?
Bruton?
Yeah, and then they speed. And we have bicycles on the road, these little kids on the road, and the road is in terrible, terrible shape. And if you do consider some speed bumps, maybe you could consider putting a couple of in that area. It should slow these speeders down at least past the 5 homes, and then they can open up and go all the way down to Bissell's or whatever. Okay?
But thank you for
It's
your
a
time.
serious problem. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Now you answer the question.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, so we do have a motion put forward by Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Hildebrand. Be it resolved that council receive the delegation of Oscar Wheeland and Jeff Howe regarding the chicane, and that the information be referred to staff for review, analysis, and report to be returned to council prior to year end. Discussion on this motion? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. Okay, thank you again for your presentations, gentlemen. Okay, adoption of minutes. Resolution, of course. Motion put forward by Councillor Hildebrand, seconded by Councillor Stewart. And this is agenda 6.1. Be it resolved that the following minutes be adopted as printed, circulated in red. C12-2019, council minutes, July 15th, 2019.
Excuse me.
Yes.
We missed
5.3.
5.3.
5.3, there is no report of councillor. She is just here.
Okay, I'm sorry. I
No
just
problem.
recognized her.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thanks for, and by the way, thanks for attending the meeting tonight, Ms. Regional Counselor. Okay, so I'll read this again. Be it resolved that the following minutes be adopted as printed, circulated in red. B-12, 2019, council minutes, July 15th, 2019. Any comments or discussion on this motion? Seeing none, I call a vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Business arising from council minutes, there is none. So request to lift consent agenda items for separate consideration. So that is on anything as you see on this agenda with a 9 in front of it. So, I'm sorry? Oh, Councilor Corr.
Yes, I'd like to separate 9.31 and 9.32.
Okay, wait, 9.31 and 9.32. Okay, thank you. Any other items to be lifted? Okay, well, just a minute here. Okay. Okay, so we have a,
Actually, I might have one. I'm just trying to think. Remember the one that indemnifies the staff? Where's that? Clarification on that one. It's not on there? It's in item 11. Not 11? It's under bylaws. Okay, thanks. Then that's fine.
that's not consent, no. Okay, so, motion put forward by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Corr. Be resolved that the consent agenda items as listed on the August 12th, 2019 council agenda be received and the recommendations contained therein be approved as applicable. Now do we discuss Councillor Corr?
No, through you, Mr. Mayor, you would just skip through those. You would just say save and accept items
Oh,
lifted
okay.
931 and 932.
Okay.
We'll deal with those separately.
So then, on the items listed, accepting 931 and 9.32, be resolved the council receives the, information course, I'm still stuck.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's a motion put forward by Councillors Hahn and Corr that the consent agenda items listed on the August 12th, 2019 council agenda be received and the recommendations contained therein be approved as applicable, save and accept items 9.31 and 9.32.
Oh, so I don't have to read this at 9.5?
No.
No, I'm sorry, okay, that's what had me. Okay, so any debate, discussion on the other consent agendas, not the ones that Mr. Corr pulled. Okay, not seen any. Should I call that vote now?
Call the question.
Yeah, so then all those in favor of, to receive the recommendations, all those in favor, raise your hands, okay, and all those against, nobody. So that motion carries. And now we'll go back and discuss 9.31, first of all, the short-term rentals, Mr. Corr.
Right, so when you do that through you, Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
you would still present the motion by Councillors Hahn and Corr, the motion as presented, and then it is a new main motion subject to any discussion and amendment.
On the 9.3 and 9.32, okay,
Starting with the 9.31,
Yes.
we'll do them one at a time.
okay. So we go back to the beginning, and a motion put forward by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Corr. Be it resolved that the consent agenda items as listed, 9.31.
So just read this.
Yes. Oh, be it resolved that council receive the memo, short-term vacations from Director of Community Planning and Development for information. So that's 9.31.
So now you're going to debate that.
Yes, and Councillor Corr, you pulled the item. You can speak first.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have a major concern with always delaying this STR issues and putting it on the back burner. In my personal opinion, it seems that we have two standards. One, we have dealing with developing issues, and then when it comes down to dealing with citizen issues. The STR has been on the table for over a year, and it seems that we do little or nothing about it. And I feel it's not fair to the residents that have these concerns about this issue. But when it comes to developers, you know, we had a public meeting under the Planning Act on June the 10th. The developers made a presentation by July 15th, developers had a recommend report and also new bylaws. Within 35 days, staff prepared recommendation reports and prepared several new bylaws. And that's for two separate individual developers. I understand development is an important part of our community growth, but our citizens' issues should come first. They need to be addressed in a timely fashion and not sitting on someone's desk for over a year. And it's not fair to our citizens that this is still, and we still talk about it, and now we're going to delay it until November. We need to, deal with our issues, and again, being over a year, it's shameful that we're still dealing with it. Thank you.
Perhaps I will go to the Director of Planning to,
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Certainly, we are dealing with it. We are ready to go to a public meeting. The issue is, when do you want to have this? We've got other pressing matters that are being heard publicly for the month of September, which is when we were scheduled to go. One is going to be the budget public open house, and the other one is the cannabis. So that's why this is getting bumped. It's not that we're not doing the work, we're ready, and it's about trying to manage council's agenda and the meeting times. There's lots of things that are in the works, that we've held developers back from public meetings because there's other things that take priority. So it's about managing all the work that we have on our tables, and so that's why we thought it was very important to let you know that I know we've made a commitment to bring this forward to you in September, but just given the other meeting schedules that have come in and are also a priority, it's getting moved to November.
thank you. Councilor Trophy.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. I know the cannabis public meeting will be in September, and that is going to be important with the ICB. If we are prepared to go in September, is there a possibility that we schedule a public meeting for September 16th, a week later?
Mr. CAO.
If I may. At the moment, we have 6 meetings of council in the month of September. Correct me if I'm wrong, Madam Clerk. We have 6 meetings, that is ignoring the committee meetings. We're just 6 meetings of this council. This council hasn't yet been given an opportunity to pick a date for a public meeting on gypsy moth spraying, which I'm just going to guess is why some human beings are here this evening. That's going to be a fairly significant, and you're going to presumably want to pick either September or October. But that could be the other thing you want to do then. The reason where you looked at what's all not an impossible fall schedule, but an exceptionally robust one where we're dealing with major community issues. This topic, although impacting people's quality of life, is absolutely more seasonal. So we're already here through well into the summer season. It will historically, it should go down into the fall, winter months. So doing this meeting later in the fall means we can presumably lead to policy changes and possibly new bylaws well in time still for the warm season next year. So whether we do it in September or October or November, ultimately if council chooses to have the meeting in September, we will prepare for it, but I would submit to you that it can wait, given that something's got to give. The staff thinking was, let's do this one a little later because presumably in November and early December, short-term rentals with colder weather won't be the same sort of noise issue outdoors. And of the 3, that's why structurally we were suggesting this. But at the end of the day, we're happy to comply with the wishes of council, and that was our rationale at any rate.
Councilor Court.
Yeah, I appreciate that, but this is going to be the second summer. Like, how many more summers we're going to deal with this? That's what I wasn't here, but that's what council said the last time in the summertime that we'll deal with it in the fall. And they didn't deal with it. Now we're talking about dealing again with the fall. We should set priorities, and one of these should be on the top of our priorities, and maybe move some of the agenda over. You know, this has been the longest issue that I've been dealing with. And I do get calls, and people are fed up. So we need to address it, and we need to address it as soon as possible. 2 summers. Thank you.
Any other comments? Councillor Trophy?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Let's say we push this till November 12th as stated here in the report. Another popular time for the short-term rentals is December, for when the hockey tournaments start. International, Silver Stick, and et cetera. Will we be able to put things in place for that time? Because once hockey starts, there's a lot of the hockey teams from out of town will use the short-term rentals as well.
It's a difficult question for any staff member to answer because, of course, we don't know what the feedback will be in the meeting, or what the work product and requests will be, other than to say we'll attempt to be diligent in the execution of our duties. 6 meetings in September, and realistically, I don't know how you add another exceptionally large one in that month, given our relative capacity to produce all the documents needed for each of those meetings effectively. If you wish, October might be more realistic if November's unacceptable to council, but I really strongly recommend against September, if that so pleases council.
I would see if we can schedule something early October then, just because we would require another public meeting to pass any bylaws, correct?
The date.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
If
Do we
the
have-
clerk can suggest anything.
Oh, yeah, any, for October?
Mr. Mayor, October, we do have, October 7th is our regular council plus policy and priorities. There would be, we have Thanksgiving weekend on the 14th, so the 15th is our normal night dedicated for public meetings. However, I believe there is a travel arrangements in that department, so I'm not sure, I can't remember the vacation dates there. We then have October 21st is our regular council. October 28th is an open night or another night of the week.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I have October 28th as a special meeting on the operating
For the
and
budget.
water and wastewater budgets.
We're heading into a very busy time.
What about
so.
September 30th? Is that possible?
September 30th is the special meeting for the capital budget review. We have meetings booked September, through you, Mr. Mayor, September 3rd, 9th, 10th, 16th, 23rd, 30th.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think this is the second time we delayed this meeting, if I'm not mistaken. Am I correct in saying that? This is the second time we delayed the public meeting?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the first time it was determined that the cannabis issue took higher priority over the Airbnb. The Director of Planning may have more information on that, but when the work began on the Airbnb, it was then prioritized with cannabis as having a higher priority.
Are we able to forego the meeting on the 7th, which would be the regularly scheduled council meeting, and have the meeting on the 7th instead?
I'm not here.
Can't do that?
October?
Yeah.
Director of
Mr.
Planning?
Mayor, through you, the first 2 weeks of October, both myself and the senior planner are on vacation. And so the October 15th and the October 7th are not available.
So that leaves the 21st then. So we could forego whatever meeting was planned on the 21st and put that one in there.
It's a regular council.
Why can't we do it here?
That would, through you, Mr. Mayor, October 21st is our regular council meeting schedule under the procedural bylaw.
This is why November 12th was identified.
What do we have to do to move that? Or let's say we
actually put a
because
couple
we
hours
can't
into
cancel that meeting,
this.
obviously. That's only,
I know why it seems offensive, but we couldn't come up with a better solution than what we proposed to you.
I have something to add.
Mr. Crib, do you want to,
No, I don't.
oh, okay. Well, I would think that September is already booked. If we're gonna do this public meeting, we obviously need a senior planning, director of planning, senior planner there at the meeting. So I suggest that the closest, nearest meeting would be Madam Clerk, anything after the 15th, which would be,
Of October?
yeah,
The 21st is a regular council. The 28th, we already have a public meeting for the budget. And I believe when the Director of Planning was reviewing this, we reviewed all of those dates, determining the soonest available date to be the 12th of November. And as she has pointed out, trying to manage council's meeting schedule as well.
yes, yes.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, can we pick another date through the week?
Certainly.
Madam Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, of course, I could send out a poll asking for availability the week of the so we have regular council on the 21st, followed by the Committee of the Whole, and I could ask for availability after that.
Is that the
The
consensus?
22nd, 23rd, 24th. I need to, there are a few things we coordinate with that through you, Mr. Mayor, and that would be the regional schedule as well, so we need to make sure that we coordinate with that.
Yes. And somewhere in September, October, we are having we don't have a Gypsy Moth meeting booked yet.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Well, I would support sending out a poll then, and finding out what the availability would be like for the week of the 21st then. It looks like that's the earliest possible
Yes, I
opportunity.
agree with that.
October 21st.
So I would suggest through you, Mr. Mayor, that that be an amendment to the recommendation to receive that for information, and that staff be directed to convene a meeting the week of October 21st as the Airbnb public meeting.
Okay.
So I have a mover as Councillor Hahn. I would need a seconder on that. Councillor Kaur.
Thank you.
So then you call for debate on that motion, and then call a question, Mr.
Okay,
Mayor.
so on that motion, seeing about doing a poll on October 20th to see if October 21st is agreeable, but that's not the only date. You're going to be polling.
It's the week of
The week
October
of,
21st.
the week of October 21st. Any discussion on that? Not seeing any discussion, then we will take the vote. All those in favor of that motion? Any opposed? So we will give staff direction to, the clerk, direction to conduct the poll for the week of October 21st.
Great, so now you have the motion as amended.
We don't have to discuss the transit one yet? We have one at a
Oh,
time?
we're not there yet, so we're gonna
Okay,
do this
okay.
motion as amended.
Okay. Be it resolved, the council received the memo, short-term vacations from Director of Community Planning and Development for information as amended. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. So then, Mr. Kaur, Councillor Kaur, you pulled 9.3.2.
Okay, so through you, Mr. Mayor, I again, we get a note or a report. I'm just going to bring it back. And I just don't understand, you know, maybe through you to the CAO. I just want to ask this question. Do they have the right to negotiate a contract with a third party without our permission? And again, you know, an RFP should have been presented at the beginning of the process, and now we negotiated with the Sharp, and they decided not to continue the negotiation, and then we were going to put in our RFP now. I just don't understand why we are not given all the facts. You know, we're asking to vote on a contract, you know, a verbal contract, and we all know in this room how bad verbal contracts end up for the town of Pelham. So we need hard facts before we could vote on any extension or any of that. I want to see numbers. I want to see what it would take and how long the contract will last. It's just frustrating that we constantly are putting reports are put in front of us with half the facts. And maybe I'm wrong, but I really believe that this only gives us part of the information, not all the information. Thank you.
This is a difficult situation in which we find ourselves, and our choice is only between action and inaction. This is not a report indicating a multi-year commitment. The Corporation of the Town of Pelham is in receipt of the funding for expansion of the municipal transit service. For a bunch of reasons, which I'm not entirely familiar with, ultimately, the negotiations for expansion with the existing service provider, which would have been allowed under the contract, failed. At this point in time, if we want expansion of the transit system for the start of the school year, we have but one choice. A slight oversimplification of the purchasing policy does allow for this course of action. Understand this memo is here before you tonight to make you aware of a situation and to provide you an opportunity to exercise your authority, because council is in charge, to stop this course of action. If you do anything, if you receive and file this report, staff are going to go forward with this course of action. So this is our communication to you that in these circumstances, this is the best, and in fact, the only path forward we can see to immediately expand transit, and while doing that, go through the proper RFP and put forward the proper numbers before you as you indicate, Councillor Corr, to which you are most certainly entitled. In the here and now, though, if we want to double the fleet size on the first Tuesday after Labor Day, this is the vehicle by which to do it. There's a local service provider that effectively operates Thorold's transit system. It does that. Thorold contracts with the City of St. Catharines. City of St. Catharines is a subcontractor, so that's the triangle there. There really are two providers of this service in the area. The town of Pelham would find itself actually in the enviable position of having both those service providers temporarily providing the service, and be in a unique position to actually compare and contrast service providers and see who does the best job. This is within the provincial funding envelope. It is a slightly different price than the existing service provider, but I will reiterate that the negotiations to expand service with the existing provider failed.
So
You can choose not to go forward with the matter. You have that, you can bring a motion and you can stop this course of action. We are attempting to do this in the most open manner possible. It's sort of on an emergent basis, and we will start going through the RFP process in the next week or two. It takes a while to assemble that one, but nevertheless, we will put that out in the fall to have a proper competitive process. But in the interim, for a reasonable cost, we can double the fleet and then make sure that local youth can get to either college or university by adding extra buses between 7 and 9 a.m. and between 3 and 5 p.m. to make the circuit work.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the CEO, do you not think that we have the right to know why the contract or the negotiation failed? Definitely it wasn't money, because Sharp was going to still charge us $60.13, and the new provider is charging us $74.50. So is there any other reasons why the negotiation failed? And could we speak to it today?
On several levels, I'm unable to speak to that today. Firstly, we don't negotiate in public. I don't have all of the answers on that. Sorry, it's a necessary outcome of having been here a month.
No, I understand that, but I think we have the right to.
Absolutely you
Yeah.
do. No one's suggesting otherwise. We are in an emergency. The only way we can double the bus fleet for the first Tuesday after Labor Day is to enter into this short-term contract. We would do the appropriate work for a short-term contract. We have staff in place who are capable of putting in appropriate terms for that purpose. And we say as late as December, but we don't think we'd actually have to go that long.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the CEO, would it make a difference if we delayed by 2 months and do it the proper way? I see the bus travel through this community every day. I don't see people are not standing up. The buses are not full. To put another one without getting all the information, I just don't get it.
The province of Ontario has seen the benefit and wisdom in expanding transit service in the town of Pelham. The town of Pelham sought for and fought for those monies and was granted them. This is our opportunity to put them to their best and highest use, which we believe, staff believe, is, although it's open to everyone's use, we suspect the best and highest use is for a student population, and this is the mechanism by which we can do that. Council's entitled to every single answer it wishes, and we should be putting fulsome reports before council, and I certainly undertake to do so. But if council sees the value in expanding transit system for September, this is the only vehicle we were able to identify that would allow us to do that. Whether that becomes a normative question for that council alone can decide and debate amongst yourselves, but this is the way we know that we can double the transit fleet for September.
Any other comments? Yes, Councilor Hahn.
Mr. Mayor, so it's just the second bus that would have to be a different provider. The original bus that runs every day now will remain with Sharp.
That is correct. He's actually amplified.
It did, yeah. Okay, so there's not an opportunity to just add extra hours to the existing bus to help students get to school during the peak travel times. In other words, make more runs during that time, or to alter the routes that currently exist to make route changes. The only opportunity is a second bus, is what you're saying, for the money that the government gave us.
Ms. Van Ravensway is nodding. I'll defer to her, but that is my understanding.
Yeah, I'm just speaking on behalf of Jason, Director of Public Works. The issue is the amount of time it takes to do the route. So with 2 buses, it's quicker. And we are connecting to the regional bus, which is every half hour. We can't do it with 1 bus. And the other reason why Sharp could not accept put on another bus is because it doesn't just happen. You have to have a bus to be able to, accessible and so forth, to be able to supply it. And they just didn't have the bus. And it takes, like when you put out your RFP, it takes a couple months to order the bus, make sure it's accessible and it's got all the accessibility features, as well as labeling and everything. So it's just a matter of filling in the 2 months until. And this was a suggestion that came out of the Regional Transportation Committee, that the City of St. Catharines is providing Thorold's busing, and then when speaking with them, Coventry did have an extra bus. It's just a matter of logistics.
I was just suggesting though that it's not very likely that every stop that we currently have on the route is equally popular as the next, right? There's certain places where you're gonna always find regular users and other stops where there's not gonna be anybody. And actually to Councillor Corr's point, I often see the bus with very few people on it. So that being said, I'm wondering again, asking the question, if it's possible to alter the routing such that where there are more students, where there are people that are regularly using it, that the routing is altered during the time frame until we can get a proper negotiated contract for the school year to start in September. Because there's gonna be some routes that they're gonna take out in the boondocks where there's not gonna be anybody on board. So maybe they only go there a couple times a day as opposed to every hour, making the circuit again and again and again. They make loops here and then maybe once in a while go back out. You follow me? That makes sense. And then we can use the funds for that extra change.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The way the grant was written is to expand the area, not to take back.
But it'd be expanding the service in that particular routed area. Follow me?
Yeah.
Kind of working within the confines
And
of what
you're
you
not
got.
providing the service to someone else. Transit's a funny thing. You don't know when someone needs a ride. And I always thought when the transit system was put in, oh, this is easy. We'll know that, this guy, and before too long, you'll have a constant thing. But it is in some cases, but then you get other cases where it's not the same every week. It's different schedules. So, Mr. Mars is recommending this, and it's council's decision.
Councillor Choki.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Just to recap it, so the town will receive a $500,000 grant to add the second bus, correct?
I believe we already have received that grant, but.
No.
Sorry, no, please correct me where I'm wrong.
We have received the grant, we haven't received the money, right? So the grant is for 5 years. It started 2018 to March of 2019. They're waiting now, the first 100,000 will be coming, I think 60 days, in a month or so, whatever. And reports are done on a regular basis, yearly, on how we've expanded to qualify for your money. So, as of September, we said that we would have 2 buses on the road. And this is why the recommendation is what it is, so that we can comply with the grant, receive the funding, and provide the service.
So my second question then, if we don't have the second bus on the road by September, we will not receive that $100,000 grant?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. When the reports are done, it will be quoted that, we started the bus in December or whenever it ended up being instead of September. And at that point, the ministry will let us know on the outcome.
But if we start it in September, then we know what the outcome would be?
Yes,
It'd be a $100,000 grant?
through you, Mr. Mayor, because that is what we said that we were going to do.
So, oh, sorry, go ahead. So at risk is potentially losing a $100,000 grant then if we don't start it September 3rd. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah.
Right.
Mr. Mayor, yeah, that's my understanding of the agreement. So the agreement is for a set period of time. We can't, so I'm just trying to make sure what I'm saying about the agreement is what I'm able to say about the agreement. So it wouldn't naturally extend. So we need to use the grant funds when they're providing the grant funds to us. Those funds are for the second bus. And so in doing so, we have funding to apply towards those costs. So there shouldn't really be a net impact on the transit as far as we can tell. It should be, the expense would be incurred, the grant funding would be applied towards it, and it shouldn't have a negative impact.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the CEO, that could change at any time. The government could say, we don't have the funding, I'm sorry, but we don't have the $100,000 anymore. Could that change? It's not a guarantee.
In 16 years of municipal work, I've never seen any government of any stripe retroactively reduce grants. It is possible that in future years, something else will change. But when you're within a year, I've just never seen any order of government do that retroactively. So I would say, not with these monies we're discussing. What does 2021, 22 look like? We don't know. They made a multi-year commitment in an effort to grow it. It takes a lot of time and energy to grow a transit system. But your basic point could well come to pass. I don't think it's possible or realistic that it could for this year for these monies.
And through you again, Mayor, to the CEO, and I think where I'm a little upset is that this issue's been with us from April to May, and all of a sudden they give us a distress letter saying that we need this right away. Why didn't we start in April and May and start negotiating or putting out our RFPs? Every time we deal with something, it's always the last minute, and it's like always saying, oh, if we don't do it today, we're going to lose this, and I think we approved it, and I didn't, but the rest of the council approved it, and I respect that. So why didn't we do it then? Why do we wait until the last minute? And I know we negotiated. Again, it's just frustrating that every time we ask to vote on something and in dealing with money, we almost have a gun to our head. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Can we come to the conclusion that maybe we can summarize our situation this? We approve the recommendation. They say they're going to issue an RFP. They're going to do that in the next couple of weeks. We get the RFP issued. So within the next couple of months, I'm not sure whether the next couple of months, they can come back with an RFP. We can have all the information, and we can proceed on that basis. Like I'm willing to proceed on that basis.
And that's part of the recommendation also, is that if we follow this route, in the meantime, we see how the service provider is providing the service to us. So then we can choose more wisely. When the RFP comes out, we'll have a performance-based decision ahead of us.
Right.
And also, speaking on behalf of the meetings that I've met at the regional transit, who is continuing to pour money into their system. I'm talking millions of dollars to do the big distance between the towns so that the towns develop intercity, intervillage routes on a continuous basis. That's one of the worst things we can do as a transit provider, is start changing routes for 2 weeks and then go back there again. If they heard that at the regional level, they wouldn't be very impressed with that. You set your routes and maybe review them once a year and make changes then, but to start picking and choosing routes for a period of whether it be a month or 2 months, it's actually a no-no in the transit business. You've got to be there day and night, whether there's somebody at that bus stop, you've got to be able to make that route. That's why transit costs so much, and that's why it's such a hard thing to nail down. But again, what I see in the region, they are committed to putting in a region-wide transit system. We've been at it for 15 years, but you're going to see it within the next 3 or 4 years maximum, that there will be buses going from Fort Erie to Port Colborne down to the GO train stations in Niagara Falls. So it's just, I realize it's an expense, but there isn't a transit system in the world that makes money. And we're fortunate enough to be having the provincial government make a hand and get this up and running. That's my 2 cents. Yes, Councillor.
Yeah, so just to sum it up, the way staff is proposing, they want to do a month-by-month contract, set out the RFP, and to extend past the end of December. And what we have to lose with this, if we say no, is a $100,000 grant. Am I correct in saying that?
And ridership will just, they will go someplace else, or they're left in a limbo? Yes. Yes.
Further to that, how do we measure our ridership? How do we know if the buses are full or not? How do we go about calculating that?
For you, Mr. Mayor, every day when the bus driver picks up someone, there's a account. And whether it's a child, a senior, a university student, college student, and it shows where they are picked up and where they're dropped off.
So we always know which are the popular stops and which ones are the not. And so have we ever looked at that information over the past few years that we've had the bus
Yes,
to
we look at
recognize?
it, through you, Mr. Mayor, we look at it monthly. If we have adjusted our bus stops through Public Works. They've removed stops, they've added stops. I mean, through this past year and a half, it's pretty consistent, but at the beginning, where the public indicated through public meetings that, you know, I need to stop here, I need to stop there, so then you start off and you have the stops wherever, but they were portable stops. We could move them easily at that time. And then after assessing them, we ended up having permanent stops. And, yeah, we assess the information monthly, and council receives the information, well, with our COW reports.
Just one other question, and it says in the last paragraph that we will get detailed, we will have, have not been finalized at the time of the writing and will be provided a verbal update at the council meeting on. Do we have any more information with the contract? And again, it's about the contract procedure I'm arguing about. That it took away from council's decision to negotiate and making sure that we don't get ourselves into issues that we see that previous councils got into, verbal agreements or poor agreements. That's all I'm arguing. I'm not arguing about having a bus or not. I'm just arguing that we should have had the right to have more information about a contract.
So I'll go back to Vicki. I know, Director, I know you're filling in for a vacationing director.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't believe that we have any additional information as of today with regard to Coventry or City of St. Catharines, whoever is providing it. But it's basically just a fill-in for us until we can get our permanent provider. And that permanent provider will be for both buses, not just once the RFP is done, it will be for the 2 full buses, you'll have 1 provider.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, what company is that, Sharp, or is it?
No, through you, Mr. Mayor, so a public RFP will go out, anyone can bid on it. Sharp has indicated they do not plan on bidding on it, and they do not want to expand to the second bus, because they would have to purchase another bus. And the bus that we have right now, it has a lot of kilometers on it, and the maintenance is heavy now, so they would probably have to provide 2 new buses, which the new RFP would indicate that as well.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, when does the contract for the first bus expire? That we're going to send out an RFP for 2 buses.
Contract for the first bus, I think it's already expired, and they are just providing because the RFP was supposed to go out already.
So through you, Mr., this is the information we never get. We always get a second hand, and why it's never written down for us. And again, we're always in the dark, and I didn't know that information. And again, month to month, did we have to give them 30 days or 60 days? So, and again, it's all about the process. It's never about the bus. It's about the process that we as councilors don't get enough information about facts and dollars, and then we have to make a decision today with only getting half the facts. Because I didn't know that the bus, there's going to be a tender on the bus in 2020. So that's all I'm going to speak.
Any other comments? Yes, Counselor Lester.
And what's her name?
Yeah. You're way off by yourself
I
tonight.
know, you don't see me here. No, my question is, the second bus, are we gonna have like one little bus chasing another bus around on the same route? Or is it gonna have like a separate route through the town and with transfer points between them to connect?
Madam Director.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, they are, Director of Public Works is working on the schedules for the second bus, which will meet up with the regional bus in the mornings and in the afternoons at the community center. And then also the second bus will have to make trips to Niagara College and Seaway Mall between 9 and 3. So there are schedules, and they won't be chasing each other around. if I
Thank
call
you.
it that.
Sorry, one last question. Does the second bus go to Brock? Or just Niagara College and the Seaway Mall?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, right at the moment, what has happened, the region out of, which is a wonderful, the region is going to now be sending a regional bus that to the MCC in the mornings and the afternoons, from 7 till 9 and from 3 to 5, I believe.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm not really into transit right now. And then the buses will connect. The regional bus will go to Niagara College and to Brock so they'll be.
So the second bus is not gonna be used for school?
The second bus is a connection for the links to the schools.
Okay.
So instead of taking an hour to get to Niagara College, it will be a half-hour loop. So the university students will be a half hour.
So university students go from Brock to MCC, Brock to MCC?
I believe it's MCC, I haven't been to the meeting, so it's Brock, MCC, Niagara College, Brock, MCC, Niagara College.
Okay.
And it's 2 buses, okay? Half hour.
So anybody that lives in Pelham that's going to university or college will get the bus at the MCC?
Correct. From 7 till 9 and
Okay.
3 to 5.
Okay.
They can still get their connections like we do now.
Yeah.
On the hour, and the Pelham bus, one of them, will be going to Welland, to Niagara College, and then from there, they can pick up the bus that goes to Glendale
Okay.
campus, Brock campus. So 6 hours out of the day, it will still be.
Further to that, actually, how do we go about advertising that, communicating that, so that students will know? Do you have a program where if you're a Brock student or a Niagara student, or, the college or university will say, hey, I see your address in Pelham,
Yep.
did you know?
Yep.
Or how is that information getting to the student?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, we have agreements with the student unions, and we communicate with them on a regular basis, and our schedules are circulated to each of the student unions, as well as we have a transit app. It's a regional transit app that they can also find out more information on. Social media, through My Pelham.
Is it in the paper?
We actually also have the schedules as well, which goes through, you can pick them up at the libraries, you can pick them up at larger businesses.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, just to answer that one, because I have two girls at Brock, it's right in their enrollment, because no matter whether you take the bus or not, you're still paying for buses as a student, and it tells you wherever you live, where to get the bus. So that's how the students would know.
Okay, and just add one more thing, we do have UPass agreements with Brock and Niagara College, in which we receive funding from them for the bus service.
Thank you. Okay, any other discussion? If not, I will call the motion. So, be it resolved, the council receives the memo, nope, here we go. Be it resolved, the council receives the memo, transit from the Director of Public Works for information. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. Okay, thank you. Where do I sign this on here? Okay. Motion put forward by Councillor Hahn, seconded, no, actually it's put forward by Councillor Corr, seconded by Councillor Trophy. And this is agenda number 11.2.1, 2019 Town of Pelham Gypsy Moth Infestation Update. Excuse me. Be it resolved that council receive report number 2019-0049, and that council approve additional expenditures of $21,550 to retain a forestry consultant for the purposes of completing fall infestation surveys in coordination of the 2020 Gypsy Moth Control Program if required, and that council approve a 2019 operating budget adjustment to increase supplemental tax revenue by $25,000 and increase beautification contracted services by $25,000 with a net budget impact of 0. Discussion on this motion. Councillor Trophy.
I have a lot of things I'd like to talk about in regards to gypsy moths and moving forward for 2020 because of the issues that we had this year. We were talking about a public meeting a few minutes ago.
Yes.
That should be for sure. And if we move the one from November 12th for the short-term rentals, we can use that November 12th date. I would also like to see with the gypsy moth set up a committee or include it with the beautification committee, because there's a lot of residents out there that have a lot of information in regards to gypsy moths and even how to take care of them, like spraying and that. And maybe this committee can set up like education seminars to train residents what they can do for the trees on their property as well. Not all the trees around are 50, 60 feet tall. We have a serious infestation in Cherry Ridge in Fenwick that if we don't do nothing and we don't start planning now, we're going to be in big trouble, as you can see by the photographs of all the moths on the trees through Cherry Ridge and what's happening now. So that there is huge. Those trees, I believe they can be sprayed from the ground.
Yeah.
Going through there. I think everybody in the town should be treated fair, even with the cost. I think there's a lot of issues that went on with this year's spraying, that people that are living in the rural area are being charged for urban, even though it says there. So there's issues there that we need to resolve. I think we rushed through it. I believe there should be an RFP process in place, because Trees Unlimited are not the only ones that can spray for this. We were paying over $600 per acre. Last year they quoted at just over $300 per acre, so it doubled in 1 year. So there's a lot of things I like to see done with the gypsy moths, and just to form a committee of gypsy moths only might be a little bit, but I think there's a few vacancies on the beautification committee, and we can probably add that, tie that in, because it's part of the beautification too. We have the landscape, the trees and everything else.
Yeah.
So that's what I'd like to see done with this gypsy moth.
So here's how I visualize, and of course, council, we have this public meeting, advertise the crap out of it, because just make sure we get it, maybe even send a notice out with the tax bills. I don't know when the last tax bill goes out of the year, but anyway, we advertise it.
We received them already,
Oh.
Mr. Mayor.
Talk to my wife about that. So anyway, we advertise this meeting, hold it hopefully at the MCC, get a lot of people out, and after I give up, the CAO has the comments also. And then hopefully from that meeting, we will indeed, as you have suggested, Counselor, get a committee up and look at everything. You're right. Did we pay too much per acre, as some people have said we have? Let's staff report, I'll let the CAO continue, because we are gonna have a staff report come forward. Mr. CAO, if you could.
This is a fairly challenging file. Fortunately, in the big picture, we have the example of a number of municipalities to our north and our northeast that have also addressed this issue. And what's fascinating is the cities of Hamilton and Toronto have taken diametrically opposite positions on the exact same issue. To deal with what we have before you this evening, there's a specific request for money so that we can obtain the data to have an idea of whether or not next year's going to be a problem. And if it's going to be a problem, to hit it earlier in a more concerted manner. The data is critical to being able to figure out how we're going to proceed next year. I appreciate that's $21,000 that's not in the budget. We understand why that's a significant ask. But the data in the fall will help this council make enormously better decisions on this very complicated file over the next 6 to 8 months, and how we're going to attack this next year, assuming it needs to be attacked. The default plan at the moment, we're probably finished our first draft, I would say, of a report that will come to this council on September the 3rd, providing an analysis of effectively what happened this year and options on how to proceed, and quite different options on how to proceed forward into the future in addressing gypsy moth specifically, but more generically, infestation. That will set a stage for public commentary for people to see sort of different approaches. And from that, we're well set for a public meeting, which I think is really important on this one to understand, because understand that communities in the province of Ontario have taken diametrically opposite approaches on how to deal with, specifically with gypsy moths. Some think pay the whole thing with the tax levy. Others think, no, only those impacted. I mean, those are completely different propositions. For Pelham to really get to the place, we need a community meeting. Prior to that meeting, you need a report with a bunch of options to sort of help frame ultimately a decision that's going to have to be made around this horseshoe. So today we're asking for $21,000 to be able to obtain the data to inform good decision making. You make no good policy without information. We hope you will consider approving that. September 3rd, you get a report with multiple options in that, and we hope that will be a very fruitful discussion. But the goal isn't to have a decision made that evening. It's to have to sort of see what's sort of on the table and to provide some feedback to staff on an initial level. Public meeting possibly as late as November 12th, but Madam Clerk, I think, was coming with some potential meeting dates for that. We may be able to offer you earlier than November 12th.
That'd be good.
And then from that, decision and policy in place in December or January, well ahead of warm weather next year. Sorry.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the dates that I presented earlier with regard to the Airbnb would have also been the dates that we would use for gypsy moths, so.
There it is. Can we just read those out again?
Sure. We have October 7th, we already have council and policy and priorities. The 14th is Thanksgiving, so the 15th is our regular public meeting date. Now, that could be a possibility given that it won't be a planning meeting. The 21st is regular council and cow. The 28th, again, is budget. Into November, we have November 4th as council and P&P. November 11th is Remembrance Day, so the 12th we have now set as the Airbnb. No, that's, I gotta go back to
That'll be
that
somewhere in
resolution.
October.
That's October.
21st.
Yeah.
So we could, if council wishes, I'm sorry, Madam. Sure.
Mr. Mayor, the only other consideration I wanted to mention is that the draft operating budgets are supposed to be available to council on October 15th. So originally, I think the intention was to try to get that public input to allow us time to prepare the budget in order to present it to council for review. So I did want to just mention that as well.
But that's just making them available to council, that's not a meeting night.
Right, but meaning, if the input will inform staff how to prepare the budget, and we don't receive that input until after the budgets have already been presented to council, it creates a logistical error, like a logistical problem.
So we'll need to review that, because I don't believe I understood that to be a meeting.
In this particular case, I'm just requesting that, I think if the input could happen earlier in the process, then it would allow staff to prepare their budgets for the 2020 budget.
Okay. Would like to comment on that?
If this could be a six-figure item, then you might want to include it in your budget.
Well, and I think it could be. You never
So
know.
through you, Mr. Mayor, what does the budget look like for the Gypsy Moss? I hope it's not 25,000, because obviously that didn't solve the problem this year. Is there an ideal? Do you have an ideal?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the budget can range quite drastically depending on what policy direction you take. For instance, on the low end, you might be $100,000 to spray only municipal properties and open road allowances. On the high side, you're talking, it could be up there $6 to $9 million to spray the entire town. So you have a massive range in potential costs. It's very difficult for us to estimate what those are going to be without specific policy direction.
Okay. But we'll have that information so we can make an educated decision on our budget for 2020.
The point staff are attempting to make is that the earlier we hold that public meeting, the easier it is for us to include those numbers in the draft proposed budget. You can always amend a budget. A budget's a plan. We can bring that late in the day, but if council makes a policy decision that's on the larger end of the spectrum, it will be materially significant to the tax increase as opposed to modest. And you'll want that information. You'll have it on September 3rd. We're going to include our cost estimates for different options. So as early as September 3rd, you'll have an idea, but until we have binding marching orders, it's really.
So perhaps when Madame Clerk is putting out the poll for that week of October 21st to whatever the end of that day is, we should pick 2 nights, and then we have 2 meetings. That's not a big deal. Two public meetings at the same week, who cares?
That'll actually be 3 because there'll be a council meeting there.
Oh, yeah, yeah. We don't have social lives anyway. We're all married. Well, most of us are married. Sorry, go ahead, Council Hahn.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, something we can do, I think, would be beneficial twofold. 1, to protect our trees, and 2, to help reduce the cost of what we might have to put against spraying for next year. And that is, and again, I'm not a spray expert when it comes to gypsy moth, but what I've been reading online is that and I had this conversation with yourself actually, is that the females right now are very busy in July and August working their way back up the tree to lay their eggs. So if residents are informed, and I think that there's some communication that we can do and be proactive here, if residents are informed of what they can do in the interim to help offset that, to prevent that from happening, that would be beneficial all around. So whether it's the tree tape, the sticky tape, whether it's spray, I don't know. There's certain times I think that spray is more effective depending on what these little creatures are doing. But there's things that we can be doing, I think, proactively educating through whether it's our website, whether it's through the town paper, through a flyer that goes out, what have you. But there's things that individuals can do in the interim. When I talk to my neighbors, when I talk to people in my ward, they had no idea about tree ring tape. They had no idea about these, and all of a sudden, they now realize what's covering their patio furniture and what's crawling on their sides of their house are, in fact, these gypsy moth caterpillars. So I think it's important that we do what we can at this juncture prior to these meetings, ASAP, in fact.
So perhaps I will, if we ask Ryan, Director, head man at Tice Road, perhaps you can get a hold of our consultant, Paul Robertson, and perhaps formulate a program, just a verbal one, or put it on, something we can put on the website from his recommendations as to, well, if you see all these white moths, and if maybe perhaps you take this measure, it may help the situation. If you could have that conversation with Paul and then formulate something to put on the website, and possibly, if Paul thinks it's meaningful enough, run an ad in the local paper. Is that?
Well, further to that, yeah, so we have a communications person that, he's not here tonight, but.
He's on holidays.
Yeah, when he returns from holidays, I don't know, hopefully that's sooner than later, can work on that perhaps with you, because I know that that's probably outside your wheelhouse and you've got other fish to fry, I get that. But there's things like, where do you get them? How much does it cost? It's relatively inexpensive. How do you apply it? And there's local business folks here that stock this stuff. So it's helping local businesses as well. So it's kind of a win-win. Otherwise, we just sit back on our laurels and wait for the problem to get worse, and then we have to spend more money trying to solve it in the spring.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can definitely get some information together with the communication officer and get it out on the website as soon as he's back.
Great, thank you. Councilor Cho?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to ask a question. You were asking the manager there, Mr. Cook, about talking to Paul Robertson from Trees Unlimited.
Yeah.
Are we done with him right now, or is this going to cost us more money? I want to set up a committee, and then if we can get an RFP going, instead of just keep spending dollars and dollars on consultant fees. I don't know, is there a cost for that?
Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, as far as I know at this point, we are finished paying final invoices to Paul Robertson for the consulting work.
So then I would recommend, we have a lot of good local people here, and there's some in Fenwick, I'm sure that you met with as well, that know a lot of stuff about this.
Yes.
And they can probably give us some information until we get out a proper RFP.
Well, and I appreciate that, Council, but I still, Mr. Robertson has been in the gypsy moth business for probably 20 or 25 years at the least, and I'm sure that he will forward this comments at no charge.
Well, that's fine. I just want to make sure that we're not just going out and getting a consultant,
Yes, no.
paying the dollars, and it's coming off our gypsy moth spray program, the
As a
dollars.
matter of fact, so the direction then, Mr. Cook, is if you can strike up a conversation with Mr. Robertson, and please tell him that it's on the goodness of his heart tab, and then if not, perhaps we have other people that could guide us. Okay? Okay. Oh, wait, word from the clerk.
Just through you, Mr. Mayor, just to inform the councillors, there is a good deal of information on frequently asked questions on the website specifically relating to the gypsy moths right now, how to control it on your property, and that information was, of course, put together by our communications individual in concert with Public Works and with Mr. Robertson. So there is information there. Of course, we can put out some alerts to make it more prominent on the website, but the information is available for folks.
In the paper, maybe in flyers or in utility bills, things like that. So, because not everyone goes onto our website. So.
Thank you for that, Madam Clerk. Councillor Stewart.
Gypsy moths, it's a cyclical thing. I'm sure we have some every year, but it, is worse at different times. So would it be possible to set up a reserve fund where we put money away every year, and the years where we don't need to spend it or spend very little of it, we're banking it for when there is a serious problem?
If I may, we have done the survey, again, to reiterate, there are larger municipalities that have dealt with this issue, and that is one common model. I maybe didn't go as far as I should have in my explanation. In January, February, so tonight's ask, and to reiterate, council needs to discuss tonight's ask, which is $21,000 and change, so we can obtain the data. Leads to the September 3rd report with options. September 3rd report will lead to, we haven't quite nailed down the date for the public meeting, but that last week of October, or that 21 through 25 week of October, which will lead to subsequent, based on the feedback and council instruction, to actual policy. Policy really needs, on which town of Pelham has none, really needs to address infestation as a topic. And one of the approaches to infestation some municipalities adopt, that I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but is notionally setting aside some money each year. If you have an 8-year cycle, it's actually just like the elections. This municipality sets money aside 4 years in a row, and in the 4th year, we run a really expensive election. And then you spend the next 3 years, you put away a little bit, and in the 4th year, we drain it down. Well, that is a common approach to dealing with these issues so that people don't end up with $260 bills in the mail. Every now and then, you take $20 a year, whatever it works out to. So those are options that are presented to you. I just ask council to consider the current ask before them, and in fact, the only matter we're supposed to be debating at the moment is whether $21,000 and change is appropriate for us to obtain data.
Thank you. One more comment from Councillor Hildebrand.
My comment was I was going to support the recommendation, but I want to make sure the residents are included on the beautification committee, because we do have some experts there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, we'll, going down the road, we'll make sure they're involved.
Sorry, one last one.
Yeah.
Sorry. So now, we're gonna get to that ask, and now we're on Gypsy Moss. At what point are we gonna look at what just went on this past year and with the billing? I've had a lot of calls, and we all know what's going on, and how are we gonna address that, and can we set a time frame to take care of that issue?
Mr. CA, do you see that as being included in the report, the good and the bad?
I do see some of that being included in our report, and the good and the bad, but most certainly, and that's really most fruitful during the public meeting.
Okay.
Because really, in a fundamental way, beyond the technical function of sending out a bill, the bigger discussion is what is fair and what's the right way to spread the cost. Is it just those impacted, or is it throughout a larger part of the tax base? And that's a discussion that really the community has to sort of give some voice to, and then you have to make a decision on. So that's really a public meeting thing, and partially September 3rd, but I really think that's the focus of the public meeting tonight.
Okay.
So it's really just about money for us to obtain data.
So my last question then, and I won't say no more. If I get a phone call in regards to Gypsy Moth payment, or any one of us, do we tell them to hold off on their payment until after the public meeting? Or are they to address this issue one-on-one with the town?
Customer service staff have been happy to provide the best service possible and information possible where there are reasonably and politely posed questions on that topic. But certainly it is the position of the corporation of the town of Pelham that invoices have only been sent to properties that have in fact received the service as per council direction and decision for spraying that did in fact occur.
Well,
accordingly, it's a bill for service rendered and ought to be addressed as any other bill for service rendered.
Okay. From what my understanding, rural property owners were to contract trees unlit themselves. Urban, we're going to be going under the town spray program, and it was going to be divided up evenly. So now I have a few rural people that receive bills. How we go about that? How we fix it?
Again, individuals are welcome to approach the corporation of the town of Pelham, and our customer service staff will do the very best they can to assist with individual challenges. We are aware of 2 instances where errors were made in billing.
Okay.
But,
And they can be corrected.
of course.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments on this resolution? I'll call it again, just so quickly. Be resolved that council receive the report. That council approve additional expenditures of $21,550 to retain a forestry consultant for the purpose of completing fall infestation surveys and coordination of the 2020 Gypsy Moth Control Program if required, and the council approve a 2019 operating budget adjustment to increase supplemental tax revenue by $25,000 and increase beautification contracted services by $25,000 with a net budget impact of 0. Any last discussion on this? Seeing none, I will call it for a vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? None opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Good, good items. Thank you, Madam. Motion put forward by Councillor Trophy, seconded by Councillor Corr. Agenda item 11.22. Be it resolved that council receive report number 2019-0048, excuse me, and that council approve a budget adjustment for WTR 01-19 to a total budget of $644,750, financed with OCIF grant funding of $162,226, and the water reserve of $482,524. Discussion on this motion. And I need a drink of water someplace. Beauty. I got it. Thank you. Okay. Sorry.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Oh, Councillor Hildebrand.
An amendment to make to that motion. Be it resolved that the additional funding to complete Hay Street water main replacement report be referred back to staff, and that staff obtain new quotes for the project. That staff report back to council on September the 16th council meeting.
Perhaps before we, perhaps the CAO, do you want to address this item?
The report, staff would hope, speaks for itself. It is unfortunate, but it is a reality of every municipality at which I've worked, that when estimates are made for work that's underground, rude surprises happen all the time. This would appear to be one of those instances. It's fundamentally harder to budget for subterranean work than any other kind, because your eyeball can tell you that the roof is leaking. You can do a pretty quick look at that. What's under the ground, you can try to scan, but at the end of the day, you've got to dig down to know what's there. We appear to have been caught in this. It's a larger job than was understood at the time it was budgeted for. With that being said, in a fundamental way, this is a project that addresses water quality. Essentially for that reason, the recommendation is to go forward with this financial amendment, the increased cost notwithstanding. This puts council in a difficult position. The preferred course of action is to carry on with this work, which has been a long time in coming, and connects to other work, and I'll certainly allow, I would hope that council would allow Mr. Cook to elaborate on that. At the end of the day, he's got a better technical understanding than do I. If it is absolutely unacceptable to this council to proceed with a higher number, with the fact that it's a more expensive job than was understood, then I would ask you to defer the project. I believe that just creates the problem next year. We still have a backlog of projects. The only course of action I would strongly recommend against is instructing us to go back out to tender. If you'd like to know the specifics as to why, I'd ask you to bring a motion to go in closed session for me to give you legal advice. The only course of action we recommend against is simply going out and doing a new tender because we don't like the result. Our policy specifically prohibits this course of action and this proposed amendment. You are specifically acting against best procurement practice. That's all I'm prepared to say in public on that motion to amend.
Before you go, Counselor, perhaps we can hear from Mr. Cook. Any other details? How urgent is this project from your perspective? Any other details you could shed on?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. This project was identified through our quality management system under infrastructure review in 2017. That's a process where we sit down with the management, the director, myself, and the operators, and we talk about the condition of our infrastructure out in the system. Specifically, where are the issues that we believe we have. Hay Street in that particular area, a little bit of Welland Road, is older cast iron water mains. It's had a long history of water main breaks throughout the winter. Some smaller ones, some actual quite large. We're replacing large sections of water main tees, valves, and the like. It's also not a very easy place for the guys to excavate. There's an old existing gas main that runs right on top of the old the water main, so it puts us in a bit of a problem when we're excavating. There's always issues with the gas main. So it has that long history of breaks. It's been identified in our QMS system as something that we'd like to get replaced. It's one of the worst water mains we have in the system at the moment. If you look at that history, it also runs at a higher water pressure, and it's old cast iron, so it's more susceptible to leaks and things like that. So it's one of the ones that we would like to get to replace as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Councillor Hahn, you had.
Yeah, just reading the report through you, Mr. Mayor. It mentions Associated Engineering, so they came in at an amount of $778, and then the lowest bid was Peters Group at $761. So it's a difference of 16 and change. What is that difference, and why then would we not go with the lower bid?
I believe that is the Peters would be the low bid.
So we would be using Peters?
Peters would be the recommend, yeah.
Okay, great, thanks. That wasn't clear when I was reading this, if in fact you wanted to go ahead with Peters.
Associated Engineering.
Or Associated Engineering, because.
No, Associated Engineering is like a budget. They don't do the work, they just budget how much it'll cost to replace.
So it's Peters doing the work?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Associated Engineering was the design firm.
Thanks.
And just one question, Ryan. Have we used this construction company on other projects?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we have used Peters in the past. They completed the Highway 20 replacement, both the east and the west, east and the west, and they also replaced Hurricane Road, 2017-18.
Thank you. Council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If we defer the project, do we get a new RFQ then in the new year?
If we defer the project because we determine we can't afford it now and for no other reason, then the next time we attempt to go at it, presumably we'd issue a new RFP or RFQ with the now understood scope of work, which is larger than was previously understood.
I could agree with that course of action. Deferring the project and retendering it because we can't afford it.
Yeah. Any discussion on that angle? Councillor Chofie?
Yeah, this question would be to Mr. Cook then. How often do we get breaks there or leaks that the town has to dig up a section of it? So if we deferred it another year, I'm just trying to evaluate the cost difference. So we spend like $50,000 for additional maintenance, or you might be $100,000. Or has it been like 2-3 years since we touched it?
Through Mr. Mayor, it's breaking once or twice a year.
Once or twice a year that we have to.
It's repaired by staff, but it does break. It has a number of breaks per season.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, actually, further to my earlier question, so if we, then Ryan, if we were to do this now, it's also the paving that we would be doing, which would be at the intersection of Welland and Haste. That would, of course, follow this work. If we deferred this work, then that section of road that so desperately needs paving would not get paid then until this work was done at the later date. Is that correct? So right now, I believe we're thinking of paving from Haste and Welland to Arbor Circle, which is the bumpiest, worst surface we have. This work you're describing is pretty much right at that juncture right there at the bottom of Haste and Welland, right?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is close. It's further to the west of that.
So one doesn't have anything to do with the other?
No.
So if we didn't do this, it would have no bearing on getting that other section of the road paved?
No, it would have
Which
no
hopefully will get done this year? Yes, that'd be great. It's on my wish list.
Councilor Hildebrand, did you have, oh, I'm sorry.
Well,
Oh, you okay?
I'm okay with a revised motion to that motion.
Okay.
My motion then is to defer it to next year.
Yeah. Okay. Any comment from you, or okay?
Whatever. Yeah.
Okay. So we'll have, so Madam Clerk, we,
Through you, we have a motion to defer the project to 2020. I don't have a seconder for that.
go ahead, Charlotte, Deputy Treasurer.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to ensure that the financial section of the report is clear, that we received $162,000 in Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund grant money in excess of what we budgeted, and the ask is an additional $125,000, so that there is grant funding in order to be able to pay for that additional $125,000. Just ensuring that the financial portion of the report is clear, and allow council to ask me any questions about that if they have them. Yes.
So then, to your point, you're saying basically if we don't do this now, we lose the grant funding.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, we would not lose the grant funding. If we didn't do this, we can use it for different infrastructure projects, but we can use it for this one without having a negative budget impact.
Thanks.
But through you, Mr. Mayor, we already budgeted this, and then we got the grant to offset the additional cost. And it doesn't have an impact on our budget.
Correct.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, this would not have an impact because we budgeted about $294,000 for OSIF, and then we got $456,000. So this amendment, this resolution would actually pull less from the reserve than the original budget because we're going to apply more grant funding to it than the $125,000 increase.
So, through you, Mr. Mayor, it wouldn't be in our best interest to defer it, because it's not gonna, we already budgeted for this year. What's the difference, right?
It creates a budget implication for next year.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if it's deferred, it becomes part of the ask for the following year. I can't really answer in terms of whether council would want to do that or not. I just wanted to make sure that that this section of the report was clear on the financials, that we did receive additional grant funding that could cover the additional cost that's being requested as part of this project.
And to Mr. Cook, when would the project start?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the contractor has held the price for 45 days. I believe they're ready to go as soon as the PO is issued.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, you mentioned that 2 or 3 breaks a year. What is one break worth to fix?
For staff, it's staff time and materials. The cost really becomes on the restoration of the project, or restoration of the repair later on, with asphalt or concrete driveways, or it depends where it breaks. So it's kind of tough to tell. Estimate probably, $5,000 per break, conservatively.
But the inconvenience to our residents.
At the inconvenience of your residents, and every time you have a water main break that needs to be repaired, you could potentially be, you can run into contamination issues.
And my last question, the quality of the water. Does that have a big factor if we don't fix this in a timely fashion?
We have not received very many water quality, like, we haven't received any really water quality complaints related to rusty water in that area. It is an inconvenience to the people that live down there to constantly have their water shut off for main breaks. So that's really the issue. But no, we haven't received any water quality problems.
Okay, so that maybe clarifies quite a bit, actually. Okay, so first we have to have a seconder for the motion.
Motion to defer.
Okay, so first of all, so do.
If you don't get a seconder, it doesn't go to the
Yeah, if we
floor.
don't have a seconder, it doesn't go forward. So is there a motion, or is there a seconder for Council Hildebrandt's motion? Okay, so that motion,
So
so
you're
now.
back to this motion.
Yeah, so now we just do this. Read it again. Be it resolved that council receive report 2019-0048, and the council approve a budget adjustment to a total budget of 644,750, financed with OCIF grant funding of 162,226, and the water reserve of 482,524. Any remaining discussion? Okay, all those in favor? All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. Okay, motion put forward by Councilor Trophy, seconded by Councilor Core. Agenda number 12.1. Be it resolved that council receives this Department of Community Planning and Development report for information as it pertains to file number AM 06-19 relating to parts 1, 8-11 and 16-9, Plan 59R-16208. And the council approved the bylaw attached hereto as Appendix C, amending provision of East Fond Hill mixed use to EFMOMU2 zone. Discussion on this motion. Councilor Hahn.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. In this report under policy 2.27.2, it says it requires a minimum density target of 50 residents and jobs per hectare, and I realize that this is our earlier guest speaker spoke about. Just wondering, how is the town in fact monitoring this? And does that then apply to Fond Hill Gardens Plaza along Highway 20?
Mr. Mayor, through you, yes, we do monitor this. Every subdivision application that we bring forward to you determines our hazard density section, which we identify what the densities are in each of the subdivisions, and we've been reporting those to you. We are meeting the density targets that are laid out in the official plan. With respect to the employment areas, it's a little bit more challenging to determine the population per density. But we do have some preliminary figures, and we are monitoring that as the projects, I guess, get fully leased and so forth. So that's how we're doing that. With respect to the residential ones, in terms of the subdivisions, that's a little bit more easier. Employment is always tricky because businesses come and go and change, and so it's a little bit more challenging to monitor that one.
Further to that, so when Mr. Palmer was speaking, he reiterated a number of times that the worst thing that he can imagine happening is that we have our gateway to Pelham, our gateway to Fond Hill, having a drive-through being the first thing that people would see after the pond there. But this is in fact what it would be. So it also mentions removing this planting strip. So I view a planting strip as the term he used was that streetscaping. So where you have an abundance of greenery to essentially hide a drive-through as people are driving from Thorold into Fond Hill. Because we wouldn't want to do exactly what the planner that spent a great deal of his career doing, making this plan, and then doing the exact opposite of what he suggested we do, and that is having the drive-through and having that as in fact the gateway. So I would not be in favor of removing the planting strip, and I think that you're asking us to bring that down to 1.5 or something meters instead of 6 or something like that. Is that accurate?
Let me just double check that.
That doesn't leave a lot of space to essentially hide through greenery, a drive-through.
There is, pardon me, Mr. Mayor, through you, there is space on the other side that has landscaping on it. But just let me get to this report again. Sorry, I just lost it.
It's under, development regulations and then D, section 3. Yeah, it used to be 3 meters and now it's a minimum of 1.5.
That's correct. That's the request is to reduce that on that side.
Yeah, I would not be in favor of that because then that would in fact allow for more visibility of the drive-through, which is exactly what's going to be there. So it goes against the whole plan.
So if I may comment on that, Mr. Mayor, through you, certainly there is a concept plan that does identify the drive-through at that location. That plan has no status. That has not been approved by council. Certainly there's been some discussions with the proponent that, they should look at perhaps an alternative location for that drive-through. So I don't know exactly where that will be located. But that too is a site plan matter that will come to council later. So what we're dealing with is the zoning permissions to permit to drive-throughs, but it's not necessarily specifically in that location, although that's certainly their preference.
So why then what is the rationale behind reducing the planting strip from 3 meters to 1.5?
Because they have a planting strip, and then adjacent to the storm pond is additional planting strips that's already there. And so they're saying combined, you'll get that 3-meter planting strip between what's there on the stormwater management pond side, plus what they're adding on their side.
So can we, when it comes time for the site plan approval then, further down the road, we can insist that there are plantings put there, trees of a certain height or whatnot, to essentially hide this drive-through area. So this isn't what people are going to see when they're entering the town.
And the total planting strip between both sides of the property will be 3 meters. If you want it larger, then council would not approve the width that they've requested of 1.5.
That would be my take, is not to approve that particular component.
Any other comments on this? Okay.
Actually, sorry, you do have one here. Through the report under the urban design guidelines from the region, they would have to meet all those?
Through you.
That part in that report, where they were asking for quite a few things there, the region, so.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, again, those are comments from the region. Those are typically addressed at the site plan stage.
Okay.
The region does provide commentary with respect to urban design as it relates to development along their road allowances.
Okay, so at the site plan stage, they would have to
Yes.
meet those requirements there as well. Okay, and then the last one I have, under the applicant parts 1-8-11, there's just a typo there. It's under current and proposed. It's got the 100 meters squared, but the same amount of square feet, 1,614. There should be, it's the same as on the left, 150 meters square.
Okay, I'll take a look at that.
Oh, Councilor Hahn.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so I would like to put a motion forward then to amend that to return it back to the 3 meters instead of the 1.5 for the planting strip.
Okay, it's just through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hahn. The planting strip, you also mean along the frontage along Highway 20, where it shows in the original plan, trees along there?
Well, actually, maybe you can speak to that, and that, I think we have to do that anyhow, do we not?
Mr. Mayor, through you, there's no request to change the landscaping along Highway 20, that frontage. It was just along the side lot line was that request. And as indicated earlier to you this evening by Mr. Palmer, part of the issue with respect to the landscaping along Highway 20 frontage is the requirement to bury the hydro line. So that is something that we're well aware of. It's a budget item, and we have to bring that forward to council in terms of getting the approval to do that. It's burying the hydro and the Cogeco cable that's overhead. We've installed some of the wider sidewalks along the frontage of the existing plaza, and that will carry forward with this development, but doing the landscaping and the tree spacing requires the overhead wires to be buried.
Thank you.
Further to that, so Councillor Chofie had asked the question, I just want to make sure I'm clear on this too. So the region essentially made, it starts and then it ends with their 2 requests, but in between there's an abundance of requests for the built form, the building siting, not being able to see visibility of the garbage area, et cetera, et cetera. Those must be done. Not just nice to be done, but must be done once we go through the site approval process. So in other words, I am not going to miss the boat by bringing up each one of these now. We'll deal with this later. It's going to happen. Has to happen. But right now, I still have the motion on the floor if somebody wants to second it with regards to taking us back to the 3 meter strip of trees.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you, those are all site plan matters. Those are things that we look at anyway as well, with respect to the screening of the garbage areas and those kind of things, so they're not visible. Those are all details that we'll take a look at. The region will also take a look at, and will be addressed, and they will come back to you. The build form, the type of materials that they use, those kind of things are all part of the site plan process. Thanks.
Thank you. Now, back to the council of the motion. Is there a seconder for it? And Councillor Kaur will second the motion. Any further discussion on the motion?
So everything will go through as planned, other than that amendment for the side yard to keep it at 3 meters. Do you see an issue with that?
Mr. Mayor, through you, at this point, I don't think that will be a significant issue. It will require, I mean, they haven't finalized their plans yet. We haven't seen them yet, but it'll require some adjustment to what they're proposing. But
Okay.
it's 1.5 meters, they'll have to make it up somewhere else.
Thank you. So, Madam Clerk, we have to vote on the amendment.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, there would be a vote on the amendment for this report, and then when we get to the bylaw itself, I would just ask for that to be changed to as amended, because we would want to be removing Article 4 in the bylaw, so that the bylaw itself will need to be amended. Madam Director, is that the correct item? Thank you.
That's correct.
I just don't want to lose it on the bylaw. We just have to make sure that we put it on the bylaw as well.
Okay, so first we'll vote on the resolution as amended.
No, you vote on the amendment
Oh,
itself.
I'm sorry,
We don't have a
you're
vote.
right. On the amendment proposed by Councillor Hahn. All those in favor? Okay, all those opposed? Amendment carries. All those on the resolution as amended? All those in favor? Wait.
On the resolution?
As amended.
As amended.
As amended, yeah.
Yes, there we go. Yep, and the opposed? Okay. Motion carried.
Thank you.
So, motion put forward by Councillor Corr, seconded by Councillor Hahn. Presentation and consideration of bylaws. Be it resolved that the council of the town of, you know what? My throat's bothering. Can you read this, Madam Clerk?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor. Be it resolved, the council for the town of Pelham, having given due consideration to the following bylaws, do now read a first, second, and third time and do pass same, that the mayor and clerk be and are hereby authorized to sign and seal the bylaws. The first one being bylaw 4136, a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 1136, 1987 as amended for lands located on the south side of Highway 20 east of Wellspring Way, parts 1, 8 through 11, and 16 through 19, Plan 59R 16208, town of Pelham, by amending regulations of the EFMU2, East Font Hill Mixed Use 2 zone, through zoning amendment application AM 0619 as amended, and that would be to remove article number 4 in that bylaw as just previously approved. Secondly, bylaw 4140, 2019, being a bylaw to accept 1-foot reserves, being parts 28 and 29, Plan 59R 16486, and Block 136, Plan 59M 434, pursuant to the subdivision agreement for River Estates Phase 2. Thirdly, bylaw 4141, being a bylaw to appoint Dave Mathot as a building inspector and acting chief building official for the corporation of the town of Pelham. Fourth, bylaw 4142, being a bylaw to appoint members to the town of Pelham Emergency Management Program Committee, and to name the committee chair, and to repeal and replace bylaw 3859 of 2017. Number 5, bylaw 4143, being a bylaw to provide for the indemnity and defense of employees of the corporation of the town of Pelham against liability incurred while acting on behalf of the municipality. And the final bylaw for consideration, 4144, being a bylaw to provide for indemnity and defense of members of council for the corporation of the town of Pelham against liability incurred while acting on behalf of the municipality.
Okay, discussion on one or any of these bylaws. Councillor Hahn.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, perhaps the CAO can further provide some information in regards to the very last one with regards to staff.
The indemnification bylaws effectively mirror each other. They're a standard municipal practice, which is simply not present here at the town of Pelham. Notionally, so Corporation of the Town of Pelham has a policy of insurance, and to the extent that it provides coverage to staff and to a limited extent to elected officials for portions of your duties. There are things in the world that are not covered by insurance, but more importantly than that, when if an action proceeds for whatever reasons, that's not directly covered by the policy of insurance, the question is, well, how does that work and what happens? As a default in the common law, the employer is typically liable for the actions of the employee, which is to say that if someone commits a tort, somehow harms someone else in the course of his or her duties, then you don't have to sue that person, you can sue the employer. Okay, so that's a basic overview of how the legal system works. The reason why this bylaw is necessary or is appropriate is that we get to a legal proceeding. The town of Pelham wants to ensure that that employee, I'll use myself as the example, is well defended. Right? You might not want me to lose the case because the employer, you'll end up paying. So the employer wants to be able to choose a lawyer. If it turns out that without that, maybe I pick the lawyer, I get indemnified after the fact, but I picked an $800 an hour lawyer. Maybe you would like me to have one that was $300 an hour. That's a real difference. I use these as illustrative examples only, not because there's any specific item of business. We do this while the sun is shining and there are no problems, so that when it's cloudy and stormy, we have a default system in place to handle those sort of incidents, whether they're with elected officials or with staff. This is, in fact, we took these bylaws drafted at other municipalities and then made slight modifications to them so they fit the town of Pelham. But these are taken from other municipalities. It's a basic default mechanism to provide for the protection of the legal interests of the town of Pelham, although it looks on the face to be helping staff or elected officials. At the end of the day, it's actually here for the taxpayer.
So further to that, then, if there was an employee that through lack of oversight, et cetera, something was built, constructed inappropriately, and had to be reviewed or repaired or, you know, in some way, shape, or form remedied, how then would this apply to that?
Well, it depends whether it's already an insurable claim or not. In the event it's an insurable claim, this doesn't apply. So that may be a full answer. It's where insurance is inadequate or insurance has a cap and we're over the cap. You know, the examples lawyers give are always horrific. To run one person over, that might be $10,000. Run over a school bus, maybe 20 million. Insurance might not cover the entirety. I mean, that's a fairly extremist example, but it is conceptually possible. So it's really, or where only portions of the allegations are covered by the policy of insurance and there other portions aren't clearly, but clearly the town has a vested interest in a given outcome. And so the quid pro quo in both those documents, and the quid pro quo in both those documents and draft bylaws is that the town gets to pick the legal representation and it requires the cooperation of the individual. And if that cooperation is withdrawn, which has occurred elsewhere in the province of Ontario and is devastating, then that protection is also withdrawn.
Thanks.
Any other questions on this? I guess my only question, and it isn't quite on this, it seems like a pretty basic, other municipalities you've worked in have had this already instituted, and Mr. CAO?
The City of London had those in place when I started working there as a junior counsel many a moon ago. County of Lambton had one bylaw. So when I got there and became its lawyer, I split it into two because I think it's the best practice. Norfolk County did not have them. The region of Niagara does, FYI, and the town of Pelham did not.
Councilor Corr?
Yes, could the CO speak to bylaw 4141 2019? I don't know if he can, but
Sorry. Very good. It's while for most employees, the corporation of the town of Pelham does not need to pass a bylaw to employ that person. You've elected not to pass a bylaw to employ me, by way of example. Could, but you don't need to. For statutory positions or certain positions, we need to pass a bylaw for a fire chief. We need to pass a bylaw for chief building official and or their designates for a clerk in the statutory positions. Since this is a person ultimately acting under the CBO, the chief building official, we do technically need to pass a bylaw so that those inspections are lawful, as opposed to, say, a plow driver or myself. You can both employ us and not pass a bylaw. So this is just a technical exercise.
and the thing I'm getting confused is the acting chief building officer. What happened to the original one?
Nothing per se. We were simply addressing a staff shortage, and so that we could meet our requirements under the Building Code Act.
So, through you, Mr. Mayor, we're gonna have two? Okay, I'm sorry.
Mr. Mayor, through you, it's the acting chief building official in the chief building official's absence. So when he's on vacation or out of the office for a day, it makes sense to appoint somebody so that there's somebody else that can sign off on permits and so forth.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? I guess my only other question to the CAO, having found that the town is lacking in this bylaw, the indemnity bylaw, when you were going through the town, not books, but procedural bylaws or what have you, did you did you notice any other lack of bylaws that stuck out at you?
Yes, I did.
He's a trained lawyer. Answers only the question you ask.
And do you have any recommendations going forward on those missing bylaws, shall we say?
Yes, I do.
Thank you for those extended answers. Would you like to share any more information with us, or at a different time?
Not at this time, thank you.
Okay, then we will leave those questions as they are.
Very thorough.
Okay, council, on all those, what do we got, 5, 6 bylaws? We're gonna, without any other discussion on them, then we will vote on all of them as a part and parcel. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries.
This is the motion that was postponed from July.
Thank you. Motion put forward by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Kaur. Agenda number 15.1, moved by Councillor Wink, seconded by Councillor Kaur. Get resolved.
So through you, because Councillor Wink is not present, it's now moved by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Kaur.
Oh, okay, I see. Excuse me. So this motion is moved by Councillor Hahn, I see, and seconded by Councillor Kaur. Be it resolved that staff be directed to provide a report regarding the Woonarf lands. The detailed report shall include information on the concept of the Woonarf lands that was previously approved by council, the purpose of the subject lands, is there a community need for the Woonarf lands concept, and provide council with alternative options for the subject lands, and that staff be directed to provide the detailed report by September 3rd, 2019. Discussion on resolution. Perhaps Councillor Kaur, as you seconded this, do you wish to speak to it?
No, it's just straightforward.
Okay. Councillor Hahn?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So, just so I'm clear, so sometimes we call it Woonarf, which is a very strange, awkward word to use, and sometimes we refer to it as Civic Square. Is that the same thing?
To the planning
Because
director.
if you go through Mr. Palmer's presentation, we call it Civic Square, but then here it's Woonarf. Same?
It's the same area, yes.
I'd like to call it the Civic Square because it's easier to say. Makes more sense, yes?
Term, and it means a shared street.
But also, though, Madam Director, the Woonarf is the design on the road, is it
It's the
not?
design on the road. It's a shared street, so it talks about the street elements, the finish on the street, and those kind of things, yes.
Okay, so it's the design on the road within the Civic Square, really?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Any other debate on this motion? Okay, not seeing any, I will call the vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries.
Before we
Oh,
leave the topic, could we just inquire of the planning director as to her capacity to meet the September 3rd requirement?
yeah. Yep. That would be,
Just one.
We will do our best. I can't guarantee you it will be September 3rd. There's many files on our desks right now. This was supposed to be dealt with in July and would have given, 6 weeks to do it. Now I have a week.
Yeah.
Because reports are due next Tuesday for September 3rd.
If we pretended council hadn't voted, council could amend that. We're just setting staff up to fail on this one.
what's your recommendation on this?
first meeting in October. We know that we have 2 planners and 1 director of planning, and they are ground zero for all the work we're doing in cannabis, which isn't stopping. For the moved up deadline now on short-term rentals, it's the same 3 humans. They're ground zero for both of those critical files. And I appreciate the important, we're happy to respect council's wishes, but I don't see how this is getting done in 1 week. The original intention was 6. Honoring that spirit takes it to, and that would be 6 weeks in the context of doing those things, to say nothing of normal planning work. To that end, I would.
So, Madam Clerk, we did take, how do we reverse a vote and vote on an amended?
If you could just call for a motion to ask for this report to be submitted by October.
Okay, is there a counselor willing to put forward a motion? Yeah, Councilor Court, seconded by Councilor Trophy. Okay, all those in favor of that motion? Okay, excellent, thank you.
So we'll take that as a staff direction motion to extend the deadline to October.
To October, okay. And did we have a date in October?
Well, both planners are away the first 2 weeks, so it'll be after that.
Second meeting in October.
Okay, all right. We're good. Thank you. Motion put forward by Councilor Hildebrand, seconded by Councilor Stewart. Agenda number 20, confirming bylaw. Be resolved that the following bylaw be read a first, second, and third time and passed, being a bylaw number 4146, to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of council of the town of Pelham at its regular meeting held on the 12th day of August 2019. Any discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. Motion put forward by Councilor Stewart, seconded by Councilor Hildebrand. Be it resolved that this regular meeting of August 12th, 2019 be adjourned until the next regular meeting scheduled for September 3rd, 2019 at 5:30 p.m. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Council.
You could see that